In a flash, everything changed when I heard my husband's angry voice on the phone. He yelled, "Why do you always fall apart when I need you?" He didn't seem to care that I was in the hospital because our baby was in danger. He complained about being hungry and waiting for my cooking while I was stuck in the hospital. He said he'd had enough and was going out to eat with his parents, leaving me to figure out how to get home on my own. His anger made me feel even worse, especially because I was scared for our unborn baby and worried that I couldn't protect them. I used to be a dedicated cosmetic salesperson known for my hard work and success. I had many awards and loved my job. Meeting my husband felt like a dream come true, and our relationship quickly turned into marriage. When I found out I was pregnant, I had to make a tough choice. Leave my job to avoid the risk of miscarriage, thinking about what was best for our family's future. As my pregnancy progressed, my husband's support seemed to disappear. What used to be excitement turned into frustration. Simple tasks became overwhelming for me, and I struggled to meet his expectations. He would ask, "Where's my lunch?" and then criticize the simple sandwiches I made, saying I couldn't handle smells. He dismissed my difficulties with, "Pregnancy is not an illness," making me feel alone in my struggles. This was so different from the man I had fallen in love with. He stopped coming to doctor's visits and showed less concern for the household chores that were becoming too much for me. Our home, once filled with love and respect, felt like a constant battle as I tried to protect both myself and our baby. I hoped that we'd eventually find our way back to understanding each other. Maybe he's just tired and stressed from mentoring a new person at work. I kept telling myself that once the baby is here, his busy schedule will ease up, and we'll settle into a good routine as a family. I reassured myself, whispering "okay," while gently touching my growing belly, trying to stay positive despite the challenges with my changing body and our strained relationship. Things between my husband and me haven't improved. On top of that, my in-laws have started showing up unannounced, which has added to my stress. They criticize the cleanliness of our home and worry about how we'll manage with the baby, but they still expect me to serve them food right away. I feel overwhelmed and unprepared, and their visits always end with disappointment. My husband never stands up for me and seems to agree with their criticisms, making me feel like I'm not good enough. One day, while heavily pregnant and sent out to buy groceries, I collapsed from exhaustion. I woke up in the hospital, having passed out from overdoing it, but thankfully, our baby was fine. The doctor said I needed to rest for a few days. I saw missed calls from my husband and thought he must have been worried. But when I called him back, instead of relief or concern, he greeted me with anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded harshly, as if my health and our baby's safety didn't matter to him. His cold words made me shiver. I tried to explain, "I'm sorry I collapsed at the store and had to come to the hospital. They have me on IV fluids and want me to stay here for a few days." But his response was unfeeling and impatient. "You collapse and I'm supposed to care. Why don't you answer when I call?" "You're so slow," he said, making me feel even worse. I couldn't stand the thought of our baby being exposed to this negativity. I pleaded, "Please stop yelling. It's not good for the baby," but he ignored me. He continued, "We're starving here waiting for your awful cooking, and you're just relaxing in the hospital." It was clear he wanted to go out to eat with his parents and leave me on my own, even though I was in this condition. His anger and lack of concern were overwhelming. I ended the call, feeling completely alone and heartbroken. As I returned to my hospital room, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. In that vulnerable moment, a familiar and comforting voice reached out to me. "Are you okay?" I looked up to see Helen, a customer I had grown close to from my days as a cosmetic salesperson, offering me a towel. Seeing her brought me immense relief and warmth. "Helen, it's really you. I'm so glad you remember me." Our unexpected reunion felt like a beacon of kindness and human connection during my darkest hour. Helen was more than just a customer to me. After a tough divorce, she had lost her confidence and stopped wearing makeup altogether. I remember approaching her at the cosmetics counter and offering to help her try some makeup. The change in her wasn't just physical. It was a boost to her self-esteem and a step toward emotional healing. Over time, Helen became a friend, not just a client. But then, 5 years before I left my job, Helen stopped coming in, and I often wondered what had happened to her. Now, here she was, providing support when I needed it the most. "I had been hoping to reconnect with you, Helen," I said. "I was surprised to find out you had left your old job when I went looking for you." "I'm sorry for just showing up out of the blue," she replied. "I had been working abroad. I run a business overseas, and it's been very busy. I hadn't had a chance to enjoy summer or good food in ages. So once things settled down, I decided to come back. And believe it or not, right after, I tried to find you," Helen said with a laugh that made the situation a little lighter. "I ended up here with appendicitis. It's just in the early stages, so medication should handle it. If this had happened while I was still abroad, the treatment cost would have been sky high, so in a way, I'm glad it happened here." Her optimism and warm smile were contagious, and this surprise reunion cheered me up. We happily reminisced about old times. As our conversation went on, Helen, with her kind smile, gently asked, "You don't have to share if you're not comfortable, but I noticed you seemed upset earlier. What's going on?" Feeling I could trust Helen, not just as a former customer but as a real friend, I opened up about my troubles with my husband and in-laws. "I'm really worried about bringing my baby into this environment. I'm afraid they'll be treated the same way I am. And without my job, the thought of living independently, especially with a child, feels overwhelming." To my surprise, Helen made a truly generous offer. "I actually have an apartment you could use. I manage a few properties as part of a project I started with land I inherited. It's a cozy 2-bedroom with a separate bathroom, soundproof walls, and it's in a safe neighborhood close to supermarkets and a police station. You wouldn't need to pay a deposit right now, and you can start paying rent whenever you're ready. It's a really good deal. What do you think?" Helen's excitement and sincerity were so genuine that I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. "Are you sure you can offer it at such great terms?" I asked, overwhelmed by her kindness. "Absolutely," Helen said. "I trust you'll take good care of the place, and I think it's important to support each other in tough times. You're more than welcome to stay there," she assured me with a warm smile. Helen's unexpected kindness felt like a ray of hope. It wasn't just an offer of a place to stay, but a chance for a fresh start. Her generous gesture was something I couldn't refuse, so with heartfelt gratitude, I accepted. Days later, once the doctors gave me the all-clear, I left the hospital and moved straight into the apartment Helen had set up for me. She had arranged everything effortlessly over the phone, showing incredible generosity. I didn't go back to the home I shared with my husband. Instead, I embraced this fresh start in Helen's cozy and welcoming apartment. Although I felt a bit guilty about not paying rent right away, Helen just laughed it off, telling me not to worry. While my husband was at work, I went back to our old home to pick up my things. It felt strange and empty, much like how I felt inside. Helen's support went beyond just offering the apartment. She connected me with a lawyer who had helped her before, and this solidified my decision to pursue a divorce. The lawyer's encouragement gave me hope, and with each hospital visit confirming the health of my baby, my resolve grew stronger. One day, as I left the hospital, I was alarmed to see my husband waiting for me. I panicked and tried to leave quickly, but my pregnancy made it hard to move fast. He confronted me about the lawyer and our living situation, gripping my arm tightly. I stood my ground, insisting that any discussions about the divorce, compensation, or child support should be handled through the lawyer. I refused to return home with him. As he tried to force me to go back, a young woman stepped in to help. Rebecca, as she introduced herself, immediately stood in front of me, showing clear protection. Her familiar interaction with my husband George revealed the underlying tension. Rebecca firmly told George he couldn't take me against my will, and even threatened to call the police. Her determination and the mention of the police were enough to shift the situation, giving me a glimmer of hope and the strength to assert myself. Seeing Rebecca's seriousness, George looked frightened and quickly left. I felt a wave of relief that nearly made my legs buckle. Rebecca immediately came to my side to support me. "Are you okay?" she asked, and I apologized, feeling overwhelmed by relief. Rebecca quickly called a taxi for me, insisting on making sure I got home safely. Despite feeling bad for causing her trouble, she reassured me it was no problem. When I told her my address, she was surprised to learn that I lived just below her. It was a happy coincidence that we were neighbors. Rebecca, cheerful and kind, turned out to be a new employee at George's workplace. She had reported his inappropriate behavior, which led to him being removed as her mentor. George was known for his lack of empathy toward female employees, often making insensitive comments about personal issues like menstruation and marriage. Rebecca shared that George's behavior wasn't just a problem at work. I had experienced it firsthand during my pregnancy. 3 weeks after meeting Rebecca, we had become good friends, enjoying dinners together. She shared that George had been moved to a subsidiary company after multiple complaints and problems at work. Interestingly, Rebecca was Helen's daughter, the same Helen who owned the apartment I was staying in. George had previously bragged about handling Helen's account, but his poor behavior led to his demotion. Helen had pushed for George's transfer after learning about his actions both at work and toward me. Rebecca, determined to address workplace issues on her own merit, had only acted after realizing my connection to her mother. Helen had encouraged Rebecca to gather and present evidence against George, which led to his transfer. With George's reduced income and increased workload, his position had changed significantly. Helen, drawing on her experience, advised me to stay firm and not be swayed by George's attempts to gain sympathy, which was incredibly reassuring. After I decided to divorce George, he tried to contact me through the lawyer, expressing how tough work was and how much he missed me. He even apologized and asked me to come back, but I remained resolute in my decision to divorce, supported by Helen. George had no choice but to accept the divorce and agree to the terms for child support and damages. As time went on, I faced a new challenge with my in-laws, especially my father-in-law, who was overly excited about the baby being a boy. I sensed trouble brewing, and it wasn't long before my in-laws made their move. One day, while I was heading out, my father-in-law grabbed my arm. He had followed Rebecca, thinking he would confront her, but then saw me and demanded that I give up my baby once born, claiming the baby was the family's heir. Despite my efforts to free myself, his grip was too strong. Just then, Rebecca's firm voice demanded he let me go. In a swift motion, she used a judo technique to throw him. Rebecca, a top-ranked judoka with national titles, had mastered judo to protect herself and her mother during difficult times. She confronted my father-in-law, criticizing him for ignoring George's actions and trying to interfere in my life. She defended my right to start over and made it clear that their meddling was unacceptable. The sound of approaching sirens revealed that Rebecca had called for help before coming to my rescue. My mother-in-law, who had been waiting in a nearby car, watched quietly as the police arrived and took both her and my father-in-law away. My father-in-law was arrested, and after some reflection, my mother-in-law decided to divorce him and start a new life in the countryside. George tried to persuade his mother to let him come with her, saying he was fed up with his job and the family drama, but she firmly rejected him. Through the lawyer, my mother-in-law sent her apologies and left some money as a gesture of goodwill. Helen explained that it's common for people to feel lost after leaving a marriage and that the money was likely her way of apologizing and supporting my son's future. I was surprised by her support, given her past behavior, but grateful for her attempt to make amends. After finalizing the divorce, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My mother-in-law chose to live in the countryside, preferring solitude over staying with George. When my father-in-law was released from custody, he found that the house had been demolished by my mother-in-law before she left. He ended up moving in with George, which only led to more problems and eventually caused George to resign from his job due to a damaged reputation. Despite the upheaval, child support payments continued to come in reliably, likely managed by Helen and the lawyer. Rebecca was recognized at work for her efforts and became a project leader, earning admiration from her colleagues. Helen's projects, including women-only properties and housing for foreigners, were thriving. As for me, once my son was old enough, I planned to return to work. Helen had offered me a position at a new high-end cosmetics store she was opening. She continued to support me and showed affection for my son, as if he were her own grandchild. Rebecca also made time to visit us. Both of them reminded me of the strength and kindness that had carried me through the toughest times. I was determined to be as strong and protective of my son as these incredible women had been for me.
I looked at my dad's bank account and saw nearly $600 million in it. I thought to myself, this money is all mine now. I don't need you anymore. After my kind father-in-law passed away, I was still grieving when my husband came to me and casually dropped the news that he wanted a divorce. It turns out he was only showing his true colors after getting his hands on the $600 million inheritance from his father. He saw me as nothing more than an ATM, just waiting for Dad to pass away so he could live a lavish life without having to work. I had seen glimpses of his true nature before, but I never realized he was this awful. Before I knew it, I was clenching my fists, angry at myself for being fooled into this marriage. I could accept being deceived, but I couldn't stand him speaking badly about my kind father-in-law. Fine, I said, hand me those divorce papers. I snatched the papers from my husband, signed them quickly, and threw them back at him. All right, the rest is up to you, I told him. Yeah, leave it to me, he replied, smugly. He offered to send my belongings, and I walked past him, out of the living room, and left the house. I knew my husband would regret divorcing me. Sure enough, he called me later, panicking when I explained that the $600 million was just a fantasy. My name is Mary, I'm 45 years old, and I work in sales. My husband John is also 45, and he used to work in sales, but now stays at home. There's a story behind him becoming a homemaker, but to explain that, I should start with my first husband. This is my second marriage. My first husband died in a work accident 5 years ago, leaving me a widow. Between life insurance and severance pay, I received about $600,000. Since my first marriage happened later in my 33s, we didn't have any children. I inherited the money along with my ex-in-laws, but they told me, we're almost 82 years old and don't have much time left, so we don't need it. I couldn't accept that and decided to give the money to my ex-brother-in-law and his wife, who were living with my ex-in-laws. However, they also said, we don't need much since it was my brother's money. You should use it, so they only took a small portion of the money. In the end, after paying a significant amount in inheritance taxes, most of the money ended up with me. Combined with our savings and the fact that I had a job, I became fairly well off by the age of 41. But even with all that, sitting alone at home and looking at the numbers in my bank account, I felt empty. When I came home from work, no one was there, and no one ever would be. The bed beside me stayed perfectly made, just as it was before I went to sleep. The worst part was when I accidentally made breakfast for two. As I took a bite of the second piece of toast, I thought, this must be what it feels like to have a hole in your heart. I really wanted to take some time off, but I had to keep working, so I went back to my job with this emptiness inside me, constantly feeling a sense of void. I desperately wanted someone, anyone, to listen to me, and that someone turned out to be my current husband. When I told him about my husband passing away and how I had to take some time off because of it, he said, I'm sorry for any inconvenience. I quickly replied, No, it was no inconvenience at all. Besides, your husband was a lucky man to have someone who cared for him so much. I'm sure he was very happy. He then shared a bit about himself, saying, As for me, I'm terrible at relationships. Even when I do date someone, I get dumped quickly. I know it's because of my careless personality, but it seems hard to change who you are. My husband and I were business acquaintances before we got to know each other better. I knew he was a cheerful person, so when I visited his company, I ended up telling him everything. Normally, anyone would find such a dark and heavy story off-putting, but he listened quietly and then cheered me up with some light-hearted jokes. His words and smile seemed to fill a bit of the hole in my heart. He continued to listen to my stories, and we started meeting outside of work. One day, while we were talking, I accidentally dropped a receipt, and he jokingly said, Wow, my wallet is twice as thick with coins. You dropped a receipt, and we both laughed. I need to organize it, but it's such a hassle. When he tried to pay at a store, receipts started falling out as he pulled out some cash. I picked up the receipts and handed them back to him, and he stuffed them back into his wallet, complaining about the coins. It seemed like the receipts were also making his wallet bulky. You're like a kid, John, I teased. What? I'm 45, you know, he replied. Just as he said, he was a bit careless, but watching him, I felt the hole in my heart slowly start to close. We kept meeting privately, and a year later, he told me he had feelings for me. It had only been a year since my previous husband passed away, So I was torn, but I felt like my late husband was telling me, don't stay stuck, move forward. So I decided to start dating John. People around us had their opinions, but making that important decision helped me begin to heal. However, just a month later, John gave me an even bigger concern and asked me to make an incredibly important decision. Shouldn't we get married? Given our age, it's better to decide sooner rather than later. This time, I couldn't hear my late husband's voice guiding me. It felt like he was telling me to trust my own intuition and keep moving forward, so I decided to marry John. Okay, let's get married, I said, surprising even myself with how quickly I made that decision. It was likely John's personality rubbing off on me. I started to think that a bit of carelessness wasn't so bad if it made me more positive. At the same time, I learned from John that too much carelessness could be problematic. Wait, live with your dad? I asked. Yeah, just recently, he got sick and needs help with daily living. He kept working past 73, thinking he was still young, and now this happened. What about your mom? Is she helping him? Huh, didn't I mention it? My mom's not around. My parents divorced when I was young, and I haven't seen her since. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Sorry, don't be mad, but it's a heavy topic to bring up when we weren't sure about getting married yet, right? I figured I'd tell you later. Even if you put off talking about living together, you could have told me about your parents. I would have known that living together might be an option. Well, let's not sweat the small stuff. Just meet my dad and then decide if you're okay with living together. And if I say I can't live with him, we'll figure it out then, John said with a smile, but I couldn't smile back. I'm not planning to say I don't want to marry you just because I don't want to live together. I just wish he had told me the important things earlier. I thought being careless wasn't so bad, but now I see it's not a good thing after all. In the end, I agreed to meet his father, as John suggested. Then I began to understand what he meant by small stuff. Your house is pretty big, I said. Just a bit. It's just me and Dad, so we have some extra rooms. If you move in, you can use any of the spare rooms, John replied. I was about to meet his dad for the first time, so I was a little nervous. Ignoring my feelings, John opened the gate and walked towards the front door. His house was 3 stories high, slightly bigger than the neighboring houses. Living there with just the 2 of them seemed quite luxurious. That's what I thought, but John seemed dissatisfied. Dad's so stingy. He should have built a bigger house, he muttered to himself. But I was too nervous about meeting his dad to confirm what he said. Dad, I brought her. This is Mary, John said. Nice to meet you, I said. Sorry to greet you from bed. It's been hard to move lately, his dad replied. Please don't strain yourself, I said. John's father propped himself up with John's help. He wasn't bedridden, and it seemed he could get up and walk slowly with a bit of help, so he could manage with some assistance. Despite his physical issues, his father seemed sharper than I expected. So, Mary, you're in sales for office equipment. With the move to paperless offices, selling the hardware must be getting tougher, right? His dad asked. Yes, industry-wide, equipment sales have been declining for about 11 years, so everyone is focusing on new services or business expansion, I replied. Considering that the domestic market for the equipment is almost saturated, you need to look at countries where there's still demand for new services. IT integration might be the way to go. I think there's something called MPS, right? He said. I completely forgot I was talking to my future father-in-law. The conversation flowed so naturally into work talk that I switched to work mode. His father didn't push too hard on the marriage topic either. He was probably being considerate of my feelings. After just a few minutes of talking, I found myself respecting him. I started to understand why John called living together small stuff. He probably knew I wouldn't oppose living with his dad. About 30 minutes into our conversation, his father said, "My back's starting to hurt. Sorry to cut this short, Mary, but I need to rest. Please take care of John." He's quite a chatterbox. Sure, I will, I replied. Is sure the right response. His father seemed to cut the conversation short to avoid burdening me. I wanted to talk more, but I didn't want to tire him out. Feeling a bit disappointed, I left with John. On the way back, John told me more about his dad. Dad's a serial entrepreneur, John said. A serial what? I asked. A serial entrepreneur. He starts companies, grows them, then sells them. He's done it multiple times, John explained. You can just buy and sell companies like that. I was surprised. Well, yeah. Selling one company involves millions of dollars. Starting and growing a company also needs a lot of money, so the sale isn't all profit. But still, Dad's pretty well off. He just doesn't like to spend. He could build a mansion that would make jaws drop, but he doesn't, John said. Don't you know much about his work? I asked. He doesn't talk much about work or money. He never hired me for his companies or taught me how to make money. Living at home is the only way he spoils me. If he's got so much money, he could spoil me a little more, don't you think? John replied. Your dad probably has his reasons, I said. It seemed his father was quite an impressive person. It made sense that John might feel overshadowed by him. Given how incredible his father is, John probably got compared to him a lot, so it's understandable that he'd have some complaints. By the way, why did your mom leave? Your dad seems so kind. It's hard to imagine their marriage not working out, I asked. Mom spent a lot and wanted an easy life. After the divorce, people only came after Dad's money, so he decided never to marry again. He focused on work instead. With that much money, he could have spent a bit, don't you think? John answered. I don't believe in spending money just because you have it, I said. From what John told me, it seemed his mom relied on his father's money, so I couldn't agree with John on this point. But I think his words came from feeling inadequate compared to his father. Later, I talked with John about living with his father. His father currently relies on John for help and also gets assistance from a home helper when John is at work. I thought my husband and I would continue working while getting help from a home assistant to take care of my father-in-law. However, John surprised me with a different idea. I want to quit my job and take care of Dad, John said. What? Quit your job? I was shocked. Dad's such an incredible person, right? I feel like I haven't done anything for him all this time, so from now on, I want to support him without relying on a caregiver. I'll be like a homemaker, John explained. I'll take care of the house too, John said. Are you sure you won't regret quitting your job? I asked. I'd regret not doing anything for Dad more. I can go back to work after he's gone, he replied with a small smile. That joke isn't funny, I said, feeling worried. I thought my husband might resent his father, but it turned out that wasn't the case. Despite everything, he really cared for his dad. If you're going to be a homemaker, you better handle the housework properly, I warned. Leave it to me, John said, puffing out his chest confidently. Since my father-in-law would cover his own expenses and my income would be enough for the two of us, I decided to leave the housework to my husband. When we got married and started living together, everything went as planned. I worked and John took care of the house. He managed the chores, handled the finances, and supported his dad. When I tried to help, he would say, "You're tired from work. I'll handle the house stuff. You rest." My father-in-law remained kind and shared many valuable stories with me. Our second marriage was going well. However, I noticed that my father-in-law would sometimes frown when he saw John doing housework. A month after we started living together, John began slacking off with the house chores. "You're sleeping on the couch again. You've been there all day, haven't you?" I asked. "No way. I went to the fridge when I was thirsty and to the bathroom too," John said, trying to defend himself. "That's not what I mean. What about dinner? Did you go grocery shopping?" I asked. "Dinner's ready. Don't worry," he replied. I glanced at the kitchen, but there was no sign of any cooking. All I saw was an empty container on the dining table. It was clear he had been lazy all day. From this, I realized what John meant by dinner's ready. Perfect timing, the intercom rang, and John grabbed his wallet and headed to the door. I was too stunned to say anything. John had only handled the housework diligently for the first 3 weeks. After that, he gradually stopped doing anything, and I ended up cooking, cleaning, and doing the laundry. It's typical for someone with a careless personality to start strong and then quickly slack off. Caught up in the excitement of getting married, I hadn't foreseen this. My father-in-law, on the other hand, must have predicted it early on, which is why he frowned when he saw John doing housework. As my husband began to shirk his duties, my father-in-law started apologizing to me, saying, "That boy is so careless. I'm really sorry, Mary. I hoped he'd become more responsible after getting married, but it seems he's just causing you trouble. If he becomes a burden, feel free to kick him out." I wouldn't do that. Really, it's okay. I'm sorry. I've tried to correct him, but he's just, well, you know. It's okay, but he isn't neglecting to help you, right? I asked. No, he does help me, at least a little, I replied, noticing a slight change in my father-in-law's expression. It was clear that John wasn't completely ignoring his father, but he also wasn't doing a third job. Still, my father-in-law was probably downplaying the situation to avoid any conflicts between us. "I'm sorry," I said. "No, Mary, you don't need to apologize," my father-in-law replied. With just one word, sorry, he seemed to understand what I was feeling. We both apologized, and there was a bit of awkwardness between us. To break the tension, my father-in-law quickly changed the subject with a brighter tone. "Oh, I'm doing some end-of-life planning and need your help. I'm not confident in John handling it." End-of-life planning? It's not as negative as it sounds. I just want to avoid any trouble later. Got it. If there's anything I can do, I'd be happy to help. Talking about John made us both cautious, so we ended up avoiding discussions about him and housework. It was an uncomfortable way of being considerate, but there were also thoughtful gestures that made me happy. "Is there anything inconvenient at home?" my father-in-law asked. "Not really, but the bathroom could use some fixing. I had just wanted the water heater checked," I said, but my casual comment turned into something much bigger. "Wait, what's this?" I exclaimed when I saw the changes. My father-in-law had contacted a contractor he knew, and they completely renovated the bathroom. Not only were the tub and shower replaced, but the walls and floors were redone with special coatings to resist grime, and the drain was redesigned to make cleaning easier. They even installed a bath lift to help my father-in-law get in and out easily. "Now I can enjoy a nice clean bath, and it's easier for me to get in and out," he said. It was an extravagant use of money, and this happened a few times where a small request turned into a huge upgrade. I learned not to ask my father-in-law for small favors lightly, yet my husband still called him stingy. I couldn't understand how John could see it that way, given how generously his father spent money. Out of curiosity, I asked my father-in-law about his most extravagant spending. "What's the most luxurious thing you've ever done?" I asked. "I started a seafood company in Germany, built the office and the factory from scratch. That cost a fortune." "A company in Germany? That's impressive, but it was work, right?" "Well, yes and no. I did it because I wanted to, so it was more like a hobby." "Why seafood in Germany? Was it because it was profitable?" "No, I had no knowledge or connections and didn't think about profits. Germany exports a lot of seafood, and we import a lot of it. I love seafood, so I thought I could make money and eat all the food I wanted," he said, looking happier than I'd ever seen him. He must have really enjoyed that time, but if he just wanted seafood, he could have bought as much as he wanted. Starting a company overseas seemed extravagant. Do all successful people think this way? It's a world far beyond the understanding of an ordinary person like me. It made me realize that my father-in-law wasn't stingy. He was just careful about when and where to spend money. My husband just didn't understand that. One day, my husband burst into David's room and vented his frustration at both of us. You listened to Mary's requests, but not mine. Are you talking about the bathroom? You use it too, right? And since cleaning is easier now, it's a big help to you as a homemaker, right? Mary gets to enjoy a nice bathroom, and it's convenient for me too. No one loses here, David replied calmly. My husband clicked his tongue loudly and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I'm really sorry, I said. It's fine, but why don't you listen to your son's requests? I asked. He's like his mother. When he has money, he spends it without thinking. Even with a lot of money, you need to understand its value and how to use it wisely. I've tried teaching him that many times, but he's still the same, David said, his expression turning somber. Since that day, my husband had become even more neglectful. Not only did he stop doing anything around the house, but he started causing unnecessary trouble. Whose motorcycle is that outside? Did you buy it? No one else's motorcycle would be here. I yelled at my husband as soon as I got home from work, but he just polished an expensive-looking golf club in the living room without even looking at me. My husband had stopped doing housework and started buying whatever he wanted. I wouldn't complain if he was spending his own money, but he was using my bank account without permission. You get your requests granted by Dad. Let me have a bit of luxury too, he said, trying to justify his actions. He had been diligent as a homemaker at first, and I hadn't seen this lazy side of him before we got married. It seemed he had been hiding his true self before marriage. I was completely fooled. When we got married, I told my husband, if my salary isn't enough for our living expenses, feel free to use the money in my account. I took back my bank book so he couldn't use the money without my permission. When I checked it, I saw he had spent around $50,000 in just 3 weeks. It was an expensive lesson that I couldn't trust him. Naturally, I thought about divorcing him, but I didn't want to leave my father-in-law in his care, so I erased divorce from my list of options. My husband seemed to sense that I wouldn't divorce him and became even more arrogant. Hey, can't you come home earlier? I've been waiting for dinner all this time, he complained, treating the living room sofa like his personal nest and hardly moving from there. Of course, he did no housework at all. What does being a homemaker mean? I was starting to lose my understanding of it. He had said he didn't want to rely on a home assistant and wanted to be a good son, but he ended up hiring a caregiver again. Honestly, this made me feel better knowing my father-in-law wasn't left to my lazy husband. I decided to avoid my husband as much as possible, thinking, let sleeping dogs lie. With this mindset, the year flew by quickly. Then a significant event happened for both me and my husband. Thank you for everything. My father-in-law passed away just before turning 81. The time I spent with him was short but incredibly meaningful to me. It felt like we had spent 11 years together. Even after the funeral, I couldn't pull myself together and felt a deep void in my heart. As I sat in the living room, lost in emptiness, my husband walked in with a cheerful expression. Hey, let's get divorced. What? That single word snapped me out of my daze. He was waving the divorce papers in my face. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a joke. I found Dad's bank account. Guess how much is in it? Nearly $600 million, so this money is all mine. You're no longer needed, ATM. When Dad collapsed a year ago, I didn't want to deal with taking care of him, so I looked for a wife. I figured you'd be an easy catch since you were grieving the loss of your previous husband. I see, so that's why you were in such a hurry to get married. That's part of it, but then I changed my strategy. You inherited money from your late husband, right? You never talked about it, but I figured his retirement and insurance would be substantial. I took care of Dad while you acted as the ATM until he passed away. It was easier than working. Now that Dad's gone, I'm set for a lavish life with his inheritance. Do you think you can get away with this? I asked, feeling the anger rising. Of course, I'm his son, so it's only natural I inherit his wealth. He worked until he collapsed, and I thought he'd live until 87, but he died sooner than expected, so I'm lucky," he replied smugly. I realized I was clenching my fists. It was my fault for being tricked into marrying him, and I could accept that. But I couldn't forgive him for speaking so badly about my kind father-in-law. I was ready to punch him, not caring about the trouble it might cause later. But then I felt like I heard my father-in-law's voice saying, "Stay calm." Right? There was no need to do anything rash. "Are you sure about this?" "All right, give me the divorce papers," I said. I snatched the papers from my husband, signed them on the spot, and handed them back. "Thanks for making this easy. I'll file these tomorrow. You can take all our savings. I've got $600 million, so take as much of that petty cash as you want," he said, clearly gloating. "Okay then. Yeah, leave it to me. I'll file the papers and send you your stuff if you want," I replied, walking past him and out of the house. As I left, my anger started to fade, and I felt a wave of laughter rising. My husband would soon regret divorcing me. That $600 million was just a pipe dream. A few days later, while staying at a hotel and looking for a new place to live, my ex-husband called. "Hey, what the hell did you do?" he yelled. I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear as he started shouting. He seemed confused, so I needed to explain what was happening. "I can guess what happened, but why don't you tell me?" I asked calmly. "When I tried to withdraw money from Dad's account, they said this money can't be withdrawn." "What's going on?" "There should be $600 million in there," he said, his voice full of frustration. "Looks like you didn't know. Since your dad didn't spoil you, you never took an interest in his affairs, right? And he never discussed his work with you," I explained. "Stop with the riddles. There's money, right?" he demanded. "Yes, there's $600 million, but it's collateral, so you can't touch it," I replied. "Collateral?" he asked, his voice shaking. "That's right. The money is in the account, but it's untouchable, like a pie in the sky. Also, that money is about to be used to pay off debts, so it'll be gone soon," I explained. "You're kidding. There's $600 million, and I can't use any of it." His voice grew quieter as he started to panic. I knew about the $600 million being collateral because I knew about the $600 million being used as collateral because I helped with my father-in-law's end-of-life planning. He had asked me to handle things if anything happened to them. Since he passed away, I was going to use the $600 million to settle his debts. But since my ex suddenly demanded a divorce, I left the paperwork to him, telling him to take care of the rest. "What did Dad do with the $600 million? My ex asked. "He used it for something he loved," I replied. "What does that mean?" he asked, confused. At over 72, Dad decided his next job would be his last and used his savings for something he enjoyed, that seafood processing and distribution company in Germany he always talked about. He trusted the management to locals and planned to enjoy his retirement here, but it was a huge failure, and he lost almost everything. When he told me about it, he laughed, saying it was only natural since he did it without any real knowledge. He had no regrets about where he spent his money. To start that company, he borrowed $600 million, using his savings as collateral. But it turned into debt, so he planned to repay it with another job. It seemed impossible, but he didn't think so. Even with the debt, he kept enough money for his retirement. In today's world, where many struggle in retirement, it's impressive. However, while sorting out the Germany company, his health declined. When that happened, he renegotiated his repayment plan with the bank. Given his long history of high-value transactions, they trusted him. He told them, "If I can't work anymore, take the collateral." They agreed to a 2-year grace period, after which the debt would be paid off with the collateral if he couldn't work. That year is up, and it's time to settle the debt. So this $600 million is debt repayment money, and will soon be zero. My ex asked, his voice filled with shock. Exactly. Didn't you find another bank account? There should be one for living expenses. Yeah, I found one with $80,000 in it. That's money you can use freely. It's your inheritance. $600 million turned into $80,000. Why didn't he prepare more for his retirement? My ex wondered, clearly surprised. I was surprised by the $80,000 too, but knowing him, he probably planned to add more if needed. He seemed capable of anything. And it looks like you haven't checked the will yet. Will? Dad told me he'd leave me about 20%, my ex said. We're divorcing, so you could contest it as infringing on your rightful inheritance, but I'd like to honor his wishes. I hope you'll agree to the 20%, I said, noticing he was breathing heavily. He thought he'd get $600 million, but the amount kept shrinking, and now he was panicking. Why did he waste so much money? He could have bought anything with $600 million, my ex yelled, frustrated. Yelling at me won't change anything. He was happiest when he talked about that time, so he had no regrets. It was his money and he used it. He planned to repay the debt himself, so no one can complain. You just jumped to conclusions and got ahead of yourself, I replied. Why are you so panicked? I asked. The truth is, I thought I'd get $600 million, so I spent all my own money. My account is empty, he admitted. What? Seriously? I was shocked. My ex-husband had been spending money he didn't even have yet. Now that we were divorced, he couldn't rely on my savings anymore, and he was currently unemployed. I finally understood why he was so panicked. Still, you have a roof over your head and a house, so you can rebuild your life, right? I suggested. I'm almost 54, unemployed, and have only a little savings. What's going to happen to me? Please help me, he pleaded. Me? You have savings and a job, don't you? Why should I help an ex-husband? You're suffering the consequences of your own actions, I said firmly. Please, let's pretend the divorce never happened, he begged, but I ignored his pleas and hung up the phone. Having a careless personality is definitely not a good thing. With that thought, I went back to looking at property listings. Surprisingly, my ex-husband did follow through with the will and gave me $40,000 from my father-in-law's inheritance. That made up for the money he had taken from me. He probably thought it was too much trouble to fuss over $40,000 after dealing with the $600 million situation. He also apparently started working in sales again, but he didn't seem to be taking it seriously. The shock of not getting the $600 million affected his motivation, leading to frequent mistakes. After a month of struggling under the scolding of younger supervisors, he saw his paycheck and lost motivation, comparing it to the $600 million he missed out on. He quit after just a month and is now a part-time worker, barely making enough to get by. But with that, his savings of $600,000 won't increase. In fact, it'll probably decrease. I wonder if he's thinking about his retirement? Well, whatever trouble he gets into now is not my concern. There's no ATM for him anymore. He'll have to work hard. I rented a small condo and started living on my own. I put the $40,000 from my father-in-law into my bank account. I consider it a kind of talisman, so I don't plan on spending it. Seeing it in the account feels like I'm carrying a bit of my father-in-law's work spirit with me, which motivates me. Today, I'll draw strength from him and do my best at work. So, how much did your mother leave you? Larry asked me bluntly right after my mother's funeral. I couldn't believe he said that without even a word of sympathy for me. He must have thought the inheritance was already in my account because he saw me with the bank book. But that was just wrong as a human being. It's about $2 million, I said. $2 million. That's it, Larry replied, smirking in a way that made me feel uneasy. Well, even after taxes, there should be hundreds of thousands left. I didn't like his reaction at all. He had a nasty smile that made me uncomfortable. I didn't know what he was planning, but I was sure things wouldn't go his way. The next day, Larry quickly started his plan, but his shallow thinking was going to cost him everything. He just didn't know it yet. My name is Sarah Taylor. I got married through an arranged marriage when I was 19. My husband's name is Larry, and he works for a company. He is 3 years older than me and is the oldest son of the Owen family. However, even though he's called the oldest son, his younger brother Frank left the house after graduating from university and hasn't been in touch since. So Larry was treated like an only child and was very loved by my parents-in-law. Honestly, I didn't want to marry Larry, but my mother came from a family that had been running a business for generations. I was in a position where I couldn't go against what my parents decided, so I ended up marrying Larry. He couldn't refuse the marriage either because his father was in business. We didn't marry out of love. It was a marriage far from happiness. Unfortunately, we couldn't have children. Since we got married young, it was hard to accept that we couldn't have kids, and I hoped that having a child would improve our situation. But even with hospital visits, it didn't happen. "Hey, barren woman, are the chores done?" At first, my parents-in-law, who used to treat me well as a young lady, started calling me a barren woman after a few years. I mean, you should be able to make it happen if you just do what you're supposed to do. It's a waste of money going to the hospital. My father-in-law would say mean things to me every day, but Larry never stood up for me. While I was being scolded by my in-laws, he would either read the newspaper or take a nap, snoring away. Even when I wanted a change and said I wanted to work, he would say, "If you go to work, people will think we're not doing well," and wouldn't let me leave the house. At that time, it was common for women to become homemakers after getting married. However, living with just my mother-in-law was honestly a nightmare every day. No one would help me. I couldn't worry my parents by telling them, and I couldn't run away because our marriage was tied to work. Still, I thought I would be rewarded someday and desperately endured every day. However, no matter how many years passed, the situation never got better. 19 years after our marriage, when I turned 43, my father-in-law died in an accident. That incident led to the discovery that his company had been avoiding taxes. The back taxes and fines depleted our assets. Our property was seized, and the company went bankrupt. Although we kept the house, we had to let go of our comfortable lifestyle. I thought it would be hard for Larry, who was then 45, to find a new job, but my parents introduced him to one. Thanks to that, he quickly found work. But my mother-in-law became like an empty shell and aged rapidly. For a while, she didn't even have the energy to say mean things to me, which was a relief. But then she had a stroke and needed care. With this, I truly lost any hope of having a child anymore. I was already 43 and somewhat giving up in my heart, but this became the real turning point for letting go. Larry, as if it were only natural, pushed the care of his mother onto me. On his days off, he would lounge around just like before. "Larry, I wish you'd help with your mother's care sometimes," I gathered my courage and told him one day. Even if it were just on his days off or even for one meal, if he could help, it would mean so much to me. But Larry frowned and said, I'm working, you know. Let me rest on my days off." Larry just didn't seem to understand. I don't really have what you would call a day off. After Larry's father's company went bankrupt, my parents started worrying about me. They finally said, "Come back home." But what would happen to his mother if I left now? We have a caretaker come once a week, but I can't imagine having the money to hire someone every day for this house. Even though I was treated badly, I couldn't abandon her. It just wasn't in me to do that. Eventually, Larry started leaving the house early, even on his days off. He said he felt uncomfortable if he stayed home and relaxed. I heard through the neighbors that he started saying, "My wife won't even let me relax at home on my days off." He began taking solo trips, and the neighbors knew his mother needed care. Knowing this, yet acting as if he left all the caregiving to me, showed he didn't care about how others saw him. It was sad to see his mother, who loved Larry, being ignored by him once she got sick. Sometimes she would say, "It's because you're here that Larry won't come." But when I replied, "Should I leave then?" she would quickly go quiet. This went on for another 19 years, and the long caregiving period finally ended when my mother-in-law passed away, reuniting with her husband. I was about to turn 59. I had no love left for Larry, but I had come to terms with many things. Leaving didn't seem possible, and I would probably spend the rest of my days in this house. Larry was diligent only in his work, and this was noticed. Even after reaching retirement age, he was asked to keep working as senior staff. This allows me to live the way I do now. We were never a close couple, but I am thankful for this aspect. Our marriage wasn't good, but Larry never tried to kick me out. He probably thinks it's too late for that now. He still prefers being out of the house on his days off, so I've come to enjoy my alone time. I've even taken up pottery as a hobby. I've made friends at this age and am spending days that I can finally enjoy for the first time since getting married. But this seems to have annoyed Larry. "You're out playing while I'm working," he said, and one day, he even burned my bag. I used the bag for my pottery class, and Larry burned it in the yard. "What are you doing?" "Don't get lost in weird hobbies, just do the housework," he said. My pottery materials and my pouch were still inside the bag. Even pouring water on it was too late. It turned to ashes. I was really furious. I thought it was too late for change, but I still had a long life ahead. The word divorce crossed my mind, but just as I was considering it, another misfortune struck. My parents suddenly passed away. My father died suddenly from an illness, and a month after his funeral, my mother also fell ill and passed away. It all happened so fast, and I was overwhelmed with sorrow. My brother Jack had already taken over my father's company, and with so many people at both my father's and then my mother's funerals, I ended up bedridden for about a week afterward. It must have been mental exhaustion. My friends from the pottery class were kind enough to check on me, but Larry mocked me, saying, "How long are you going to sleep?" I was tired after Mom's funeral too, but I didn't sleep that much. It must be nice to sleep all you want without working. It might have been a valid point, but as words from a husband to a wife, it was really hurtful. The next day, I forced myself to get up and return to my daily routine, since I didn't have the luxury to enjoy my hobbies anymore. It was a bare minimum life, but Larry seemed satisfied and didn't care about my feelings. Then, sometime after my mother's funeral, I remembered that the payment deadline to the funeral home was approaching and looked at the bank book. Jack was busy with work, so I had promised to make the payment on his behalf. However, Larry saw me with the bank book and came over with a sleazy smile. "So, how much was your mother's inheritance?" I was shocked by his words. He said this right after my mother's funeral, without a single word of concern for me. He must have thought the inheritance had been deposited because he saw me looking at the bank book. But surely that's unthinkable for a human being. I answered dully, "About $2 million. $2 million? That's it?" he said, smirking with an unpleasant smile. "Well, even after taxes, there should be hundreds of thousands left." What an awful smile. I didn't know what Larry was thinking, but I was sure things wouldn't go his way. Without saying anything to him, I quietly put away the bank book. Finally, noticing the mood, Larry spoke up. "Well, you've had it tough. You should rest early today." It was unusual for Larry to offer kind words, maybe because he felt awkward. Far from making me happy, it made me feel sick. I didn't want to see his face anymore, so I went to bed early that day. However, something unexpected happened the next day. After breakfast, Larry left for work as usual. But then I got a call saying he hadn't shown up at his workplace. I was shocked because this had never happened before. Worried that he might have been in an accident, I hurriedly called Larry, but I couldn't get through. As I paced around restlessly, I walked into the living room and understood everything. On the living room table was a piece of paper. It was a divorce form already filled out by Larry. The moment I saw it, I thought, "No way," and checked where I had put the bank book the day before. As I expected, the bank book was gone. "Unbelievable," I muttered and sighed. It wasn't an accident or anything. Larry had likely disappeared on his own. I had thought he was up to something in the living room that morning. By taking those items, he must be planning to start a new life without me. Larry hadn't driven me out before because he was waiting for my parents' inheritance. The stolen bank book was proof enough. Even with this realization, I remained calm. There was no need to panic. I slowly filled out the divorce form and took it to the city office. Larry had sown the seeds of his own downfall. I decided he needed to fully understand that it was too late for regrets. I properly contacted Larry's workplace and said, "I can't reach him either, but it doesn't seem like an accident. I'll let you know as soon as I get in touch. Sorry for the inconvenience." The workplace said they would treat it as a paid leave for the day and wished him well, which made me envious of Larry for having such a good workplace. After all, it was a company introduced by my parents. I hoped he would be sincere towards his workplace, but now he was going to be a stranger to me. I managed to submit the divorce form successfully. After going through so much, it's surprising how easily I became free. I wondered if my life could have been different if I had divorced earlier. As I was packing up my things, my phone rang. It was Larry, who hadn't answered my calls before. I knew what he would say, so I ignored it and kept packing. The phone kept ringing again and again. Eventually, even the house phone started ringing. It was probably Larry, and it was so annoying that I reluctantly decided to answer it. "Hello," I said casually. Sure enough, I heard Larry's panicked voice on the other end. "Yes, I called because I was informed you hadn't shown up for work. You should contact your workplace immediately." "That's not the issue right now." Larry interrupted me, shouting, "I can't withdraw the money." Hearing his voice, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. So he finally noticed, huh? I thought he must not have realized because he stole the bank book in a hurry. "My ID? You burned it, remember?" "What? No, don't you remember it was in the bag for my pottery class?" I answered, laughing. Larry sounded flustered. "Then this ID, isn't it expired?" "I wouldn't know. After your mother passed away, I repeatedly asked you to take care of the paperwork. I went to the bank for the procedure, but they said it couldn't be done because I wasn't the heir. So the bank book was left untouched with just a few dollars remaining. Don't mess around. You have to properly organize things for someone who's not here anymore, right? You said you'd take care of it eventually, so keep it in mind. Don't blame me." "Then what am I supposed to do with this bank book?" "What to do or not to do, unless I go to do the paperwork, there's nothing that can be done about it." As I spoke, Larry kept complaining, but I didn't feel like replying and fell silent. Impatiently, Larry seemed to have gone back to the bank teller, explaining the situation. "I accidentally burned the ID. Can't anything be done? Maybe by proxy? Look, I'm on the phone with my wife right now." It seemed he put it on speaker, and I could hear the troubled voice of the teller too. I questioned his words. "Larry, what are you talking about? You know you can't do anything like that as a stranger, right?" "Huh?" "The divorce papers were properly processed just now. Thanks for the preparation. Bye." I said what I wanted to say and hung up the phone. I'm sure the bank teller heard my last words too. By now, Larry must be either pale with shock or red with anger. Just imagining it made me laugh. I knew I had to leave the house before he returned. With that thought, I quickly packed my things and left the house. My destination was my family's old home, which was empty after my parents passed away. I had inherited that home as well. My mother's assets from running her company totaled $15 million. However, inheriting a large sum of cash wouldn't be safe if Larry found out, especially since we had no children. So I inherited just enough to live comfortably, about $2 million. The rest was the family home, my mother's beautifully preserved dresses, and my father's antiques. If these heirlooms were appraised, they would be worth a lot. I had my brother Jack's permission for this arrangement. Jack had moved out after getting married and was worried about the family home becoming vacant. He had children and had taken over the company, so he was happy to inherit just the cash. We completed the inheritance discussions peacefully. After arriving at the family home, I informed Jack that I had divorced Larry and would be living there. He said, "If you are going to live in the family home, it won't be empty," which is a relief. "But are you really okay with divorcing Larry, Sarah?" "Yes," I replied. "We don't have children, and both our parents have passed away. If we both want a divorce, then it's for the best. I want to restart my life, and I have no regrets." Jack was worried about me being alone, but living as Larry's servant for life would have been worse. Besides, if I could spend the last moments of my life in this house, where I had many memories with my family, even if I was alone, it would be happiness. Larry kept calling me many times after that, but he didn't think I would be at the family home and never came to visit. That day, I spent alone in peace. The house was lonely without a family, but I felt relieved from the bottom of my heart. The next day, I finally gathered the energy to go make a deposit. The bank book was with Larry, and it was a bit troublesome to retrieve it. I decided to go around 5:00 a.m., assuming Larry would be asleep. When I got home and opened the front door, the smell of alcohol hit me. Wow, I couldn't help but grimace at the smell. Entering the living room, I saw beer cans scattered all over. My bank book was torn and left on the table. This is terrible. Tearing up someone's bank book like this, no matter how angry you are, is just wrong. I gathered up the pieces and put them in my bag. I also took a few clothes and went back to my family home. Then I headed to the bank. As I approached the entrance, I heard someone call out, "Sarah." It was Larry. He had been waiting for me. I noticed the bank book was gone, so I figured you'd come here. "Whether I come here or not is none of your business," I said. "Don't say that. We've been together for so long." Even though the divorce was finalized, he still talked like this. I ignored him and entered the bank. Larry kept trying to talk to me, but I firmly ignored him. That's when it happened. "Brother, isn't that Sarah?" Someone called out. "Frank, why are you here?" It was Larry's brother, Frank. Both Larry and I were surprised to see him. We hardly ever saw Frank, usually only at funerals. It had been about 43 years since I married Larry, and this was probably the third time I met Frank. He had wanted to cut ties with the family, but his parents, worried about their company's reputation, begged him to at least show up for important family events. Since we had met at my mother-in-law's funeral a few years ago, he probably recognized us. "Ah, I'm here for the inheritance of Mom's estate. Thought I'd check the balance and then inform you too," Frank said. Larry's eyes lit up. I was surprised too. I thought there was just a few dollars left in the bank account, but according to Frank, there were also investment trusts set up a long time ago and safety deposit boxes rented during their father's lifetime. Frank had heard about it from his mother before she passed away. She had sent him a message saying, "If anything happens, you take care of it." However, due to his busy life, it had taken him this long to act. Frank looked apologetically at me and Larry. There was a letter in the safety deposit box along with some jewelry. Mom said all her estate should go to Sarah. "What?" I was surprised by Frank's words, but Larry looked even more shocked. Frank pulled out a letter from the documents he had with him. I recognized the stationery because I had bought it for my mother-in-law. The letter clearly stated that all the jewelry in the safety deposit box and other assets should go to me, her daughter-in-law Sarah. I could picture my mother-in-law writing it carefully. I remembered asking her if she needed the letter, but she had coldly replied, "It has nothing to do with you." Maybe she meant to write this letter at that time. I covered my mouth in surprise. "Sarah, you've been taking care of everything on your own, right?" Frank said. Despite the mean things my mother-in-law had said, She was sorry and wanted me to handle the estate. She knew that if she told Larry, he'd probably try to keep it quiet. Next to me, Larry's face turned red, and he started trembling. Well, I never intended to inherit anything, but as the legal heir, I thought I had to handle it. It's just a matter of changing the name to Sarah, so that shouldn't be a problem for you, right, Larry? Frank said this casually, not knowing about our divorce. Later, I was called to the bank counter. Larry, without any purpose, just sat in the lobby, lacking the energy to follow. That day, I completed the reissuance of the bank book and the transfer for the funeral home. I'll be going ahead, Sarah. I'll contact you again, Frank said, leaving Larry and me behind in the bank. I safely returned home. Frank contacted me again later, explaining that Larry had protested, saying, "Such a letter is invalid." But Frank convinced him, saying, "Respect Mom's wishes." However, unable to satisfy Larry, Frank visited a lawyer for free advice. Although the letter couldn't be recognized as an official will, the lawyer suggested that settling by discussion would be more cost-effective than hiring a lawyer. Larry agreed to the inheritance of the house. The investment trusts weren't worth much, and Larry reluctantly gave up on those and the jewelry. Thus, I formally received my mother-in-law's estate. If Sarah gets Mom's estate, I should get it from my mother-in-law, right? Larry argued with the lawyer, but that was a different matter. It was embarrassing. Even the lawyer scolded him. Larry couldn't accept it and finally tracked me down at the family home, showing up at my doorstep. I was wrong. Let's start over, he begged, realizing he couldn't get anything. He knelt at the doorstep, pleading for reconciliation. Start over? There was never any love between us to begin with. What's there to start over? For the first time, I felt free to speak my mind. I shared my long-held feelings with Larry. He fell silent, seemingly regretting his actions for the first time, and I couldn't help but smile. At least you still have the house, right? Have you contacted your workplace? If you're so desperate for money, you better work hard and not lose your job. After saying that, I closed the door. It was finally over. The bank book held assets left by our mothers, and with this, I could surely live comfortably from now on. Larry, however, continued to be absent from work without informing his workplace, which led to his dismissal. I had warned him. Without even his passion for work, what was left for him? Maybe his hard work wasn't out of responsibility, but to maintain his dignity. Now, without anyone to show his dignity to and missing the easy money he thought he'd get, it wouldn't be surprising if he felt he had lost his purpose in life. Even though I was concerned for someone I had spent years with, that was it. I had no intention of helping him. I truly apologize for the trouble caused to you, Sarah. It's really regrettable, Frank said. He was the only one who apologized and told me I no longer needed to deal with Larry. Realizing the family's issues early on, Frank had left home young and was probably living happily now without involving himself in that home. Larry had become a recluse, but at his age, he could probably live on his pension. Wanting to start over showed he had some courage at least, but he should try starting over on his own. I began attending pottery classes again, and my friends were delighted with my return. I hadn't realized how enjoyable it could be to spend time just for myself. At the pottery class, I even met someone wonderful. Though I had sworn off marriage, being with someone who loves me might also be a form of happiness. Rather than being alone forever, it might be better to embrace new beginnings. It might feel too late, but just like with the divorce, it's never too late as long as you're alive. Anyone can find happiness, no matter their age. I believe that. You should just rent a cheap apartment and live there. After all, someone who just stays at home doesn't deserve to live in this house, said Kelly, who had returned from the city. She was now trying to drive me out of the house where I was living with my in-laws, planning to take my place. My in-laws don't understand working from home, and my husband, who wants the house, is siding with Kelly. Together with Kelly, my husband Eric and my in-laws keep blaming me. Do they even realize who is paying the mortgage for this house? That's when it struck me. If I left, who would pay the $7,500 monthly mortgage? There was no reason for me to keep living with these people who made me feel so terrible. If they wanted me to leave, then I would leave. I had endured enough, and my anger had reached its peak. I'll change the ownership and mortgage to your name, I told my husband. With that, I divorced my overjoyed husband Eric and left the house. Little did they know they would soon face an unexpected situation. My name is Lauren. I used to live with my husband Eric, who is 3 years older than me. I met Eric while working at a company, but it wasn't the typical office romance. Eric worked for the cleaning company that serviced my office. When I met my husband, I had just lost both of my parents in quick succession. First, my father was diagnosed with an illness, and the doctors gave him only 4 months to live. While caring for him, my mother fell ill too, and despite her fight, they both passed away, leaving me alone. Having no siblings, I suddenly found myself all by myself, struggling to accept the reality that my parents were gone. After their passing, I would often think of them at random moments and tear up. However, I tried to hide my feelings from those around me who were being considerate. I forced myself to smile all the time while at work. The first time my husband Eric spoke to me, I was trying not to let anyone notice as tears welled up in my eyes. I stood in the hallway during a break, staring blankly out the window, lost in thoughts of my parents. I had seen Eric at work before, and we had exchanged nods, but we had never spoken, and I didn't even know his name yet. Eric approached me as I looked out the window and asked, "Are you okay? You seem a bit down." In response to Eric's gentle inquiry, I found myself talking about my parents. Maybe it was easier because he was a stranger whose name I didn't even know. When Eric heard about my parents' passing, he sympathized, saying he was close to his own parents and could understand the loneliness. I was glad that Eric listened to my story. After that, we started having brief conversations whenever we saw each other at work. And it didn't take long before we started meeting outside of work. Soon after, we started dating. Eric introduced me to his parents. As Eric had mentioned, he seemed to have a good relationship with them. His parents, aware of my loss, were considerate and invited me to visit them anytime. I quickly grew close to my in-laws, and without a formal proposal, it naturally led to me marrying Eric. After the wedding, we rented an apartment near my in-laws and started our life together. After getting married, I quit my job and switched to a company that allowed me to work fully remotely from home. I did this considering the possibility of having children with Eric in the future. I told Eric about my career change, but it seems he didn't quite understand it. For now, he just knows that I work from home using my computer. Since my salary didn't change after switching jobs, I decided to take care of the living expenses. Eric earned less than I did, so we agreed that I would pay for our expenses while Eric would save his salary, except for what he spent on social activities. Eric didn't have any expensive hobbies, and before we married, his social expenses were mostly just dates with me or going out with friends. Eric himself said he was okay with me managing our savings, so this is how we handled our finances. Working from home was all positives for me. Above all, I was happy that I could enjoy leisurely meals with Eric when he came home. This wouldn't have been possible if I were still working at my previous company. Before marriage, I often made simple meals just for myself, but now, wanting to please Eric, I find myself wanting to cook more elaborate dishes. Our life together was peaceful, but then a few years into our marriage, something shocking happened. My in-laws' house was completely destroyed in a fire. Fortunately, my in-laws were unharmed, but they lost all their possessions and irreplaceable memories like photo albums. For a while, my in-laws stayed in our apartment, and they were deeply upset. I wanted to cheer up the two people who had helped me heal from the loss of my own parents, so I did everything I could to care for them. I cooked, of course, and also took care of the household chores during breaks from work, making sure they felt comfortable. On weekends, Eric and I would go out with them. However, my in-laws felt like they were being a burden and struggled to regain their usual cheerfulness. They often mentioned that they couldn't stay with us forever and were concerned about imposing on us. So my husband Eric and I decided to build a house to live with my in-laws. Until now, my in-laws had never brought up the idea of living together, but Eric and I had been considering it. In preparation, I had been saving from my salary, separate from the savings my husband was making, thinking it was better to get a mortgage sooner rather than later. I suggested that we use this opportunity to build a house. My in-laws were delighted, and the conversation quickly came to an agreement. The house they had lived in was a charming wooden structure built by my great-grandfather. It had been fine when they were younger, but as they aged, they started experiencing various health issues. Therefore, they had many requests for the new house. Eric, too, wanted to add various features, thinking that if we were going to build it, we might as well do it right. Ultimately, the cost ended up being much higher than anticipated. Still, convincing myself that we would be living there for a long time, I agreed to build a house that met all three of their requests. I began to sense something was off around this time. Eric was excessively claiming to his parents, Rachel and Kyle, that he was the one building the house, and they were constantly thanking only him. Even though the house and the mortgage were in my name, and the down payment came from my savings, it seemed like Eric hadn't mentioned this to Rachel and Kyle at all. Because of Eric's insistent claims that it was his house, Rachel and Kyle started pressuring me to thank Eric as well. I appreciate Eric not just for the money. I paid more because I could, not because I wanted gratitude from Eric or Rachel and Kyle. However, even when Rachel and Kyle said things to me, Eric didn't stand up for me. Instead, he jokingly said, "That's right, you should be grateful to me for letting you live in a new house." I was definitely upset after hearing these falsehoods repeatedly. I understand that Eric has his pride, so I didn't ask him to tell his parents the whole truth, but I did ask him to stop making it seem like I was doing nothing. However, Eric, feeling more confident because of our new house, just wouldn't listen. Then I found out that Eric was telling a terrible lie to his parents. He incredibly told them he worked at the same company where I used to work, which is considered a well-known major corporation. True, Eric still has dealings with that company, but as I began to notice Eric's lies and his inflated pride, I started to feel increasingly distrustful of him. I also felt uncomfortable because his parents always seemed to favor him. Still, I thought once we moved into our new home, the issue of who built the house wouldn't come up anymore, so I just kept enduring patiently. However, once our new home was completed and we started living there, their attitude towards me clearly began to change. It seemed like my in-laws, just like Eric, didn't understand the concept of working from home. They thought I was just playing around because I didn't go out during the day and was always at my computer. Eric had been complaining to them that Lauren is just playing around all day, and they seemed to have completely believed it. Before we moved, they never said anything, maybe because they felt I was taking care of them, but the sarcasm increased as soon as we moved. They would say things like, "Eric built such a fine house, and you just stay in and play around. Must be nice. Why don't you work a little and help Eric out?" Even when I was working on my computer, they would come to my room just to make these snide Eric. The discomfort made me leave the house more and more, working from a cafe instead. I repeatedly asked Eric to clear up his parents' misunderstanding. While Eric might not understand the work I do, it's my salary that's supporting his and his parents' lifestyle. All I needed was for him to tell his parents that, but Eric just said, just let them say whatever they want, still not listening. Since they thought I wasn't working, I got stuck with all the housework, and his parents started bossing me around. I couldn't take it anymore and finally stood up to them. Eric was there too, and I thought he would finally take my side seeing how upset I was. But instead, he yelled at me, "Don't talk back." Then he thrust a completed divorce paper at me, threatening divorce if I didn't comply. I had never seen Eric so angry before, and his behavior completely intimidated me, making me give in to him and his parents' demands. From that day on, both his parents and Eric's attitudes towards me turned utterly cold. The only time I felt seen and could find some solace was when I was working at my computer. I immersed myself in work to forget the treatment I received from my in-laws and husband. One day, my sister-in-law Kelly, who had been living in the city, came back to visit. She was coming to see the new house and planned to stay for a while. My in-laws immediately started complaining about me to her. They said, "Lauren is always cooped up in her room playing on her computer. Does she even realize whose generosity allows her to live in such a nice house? What on earth is she doing on that computer all day? Playing games? Is she some kind of nerd? That's just weird. We don't really understand all this, but maybe she's one of those nerds. You think if she's always on her computer, she must be one, right? Isn't she ashamed of not working?" Trying to escape their loud conversation meant for me to hear, I went to my room. Then I heard something even more shocking. They said, "Wasn't Lauren just a cleaner at Eric's company? It's amazing how she lies about working from home. She couldn't possibly have the skills for that." Kelly was talking as if my and Eric's roles were completely reversed. Since Eric had told his parents he worked at a major corporation, maybe he had also lied that I was a cleaner. The real liar here was Eric. I wanted to tell this to Rachel and Kelly, but given everything that had happened, I doubted they would believe me, so I just gave up. Ever since Kelly came to visit, my place at the dining table was taken over by her, and I couldn't even eat at the same time as everyone else. While they ate the meals I prepared during my work breaks, I would be secluded in my room, continuing my work. This went on for a week, and the day for Kelly to return to the city came. But suddenly, Kelly declared, "I'm going to live in this house too. After staying here, I found it quite comfortable. I just quit my job, so I've decided to move back here," Kelly said. She had been working in the apparel industry but got tired of the office drama and decided to take a break. Her family home was being rebuilt, and when she returned and saw our new house, she found it more luxurious than she had expected. Leaving the city to start a business here could be good. "At my level, I can work from anywhere," she said. My in-laws, Rachel and Kyle, were thrilled with Kelly's words, and Eric seemed quite pleased with the compliments about the house too. However, there was no designated room for Kelly in this house. Until now, she had been staying in the guest room, but if she were to live here permanently, another room for Kelly would be needed, and the house had no spare rooms. Kelly had realized this after living with us for a week. She told me, "I'll live here, so you should leave," with a smug, malicious grin. "People who just play around at home don't deserve to live in a house like this. You should find some cheap apartment somewhere and live there." "No, this house is mine because I started to say, but Rachel cut me off. "That's a good idea. You do nothing but stay at home all day." Rachel sided with Kelly, leaving me no room to argue. I tried desperately to explain my job, but Kelly, who had just said that work could be done from anywhere, wouldn't understand about working from home. Just because I'm not going out, they say I'm not working. They're trying to corner me with such an absurd argument. After everything that's happened, I'm really starting to get angry. Eric doesn't try to speak the truth, just stands there laughing and watching the situation. Until now, I kept quiet, considering Eric's position, but I finally told Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly that this house was built in my name. I'm paying for all the mortgage and all the living expenses. The down payment came from my savings, and Eric hasn't paid a single penny. Seeing me speak up to this extent, Eric was clearly panicked. However, the only things that came out of his mouth were words to berate me and self-serving statements to hide the truth. He shouted at me, calling me noisy, telling me to shut up, and calling me a liar. Eric was obviously flustered, and it was clear he was hiding something, Yet Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly still defended him, calling me the liar no matter how many times I tried to explain. I said it wasn't a lie, but they didn't believe me. That's when it struck me, if I left, who would pay the monthly mortgage of $7,500? There was no reason for me to keep living with these people, enduring such unpleasantness. If this house is supposedly built by Eric, who works at a major corporation, maybe it should all truly be his. With that thought, I decided to sign the divorce papers that Eric had pushed on me, intending to threaten me. When I offered to change the house's title to Eric's name, he was so delighted he almost danced. He must have thought the house would now fully become his own in name and reality. He's not wrong, but Eric misunderstood one thing. Initially, to change the mortgage to his name, we tried to go through the process together, but Eric disliked the complex procedures and told me to handle it alone. Just you go and listen to all that complicated stuff. It's just a name change, right? Get it ready for my signature only, he said. Since that wasn't possible, I took the reluctant Eric to the bank and a legal professional for consultation. Throughout, Eric didn't listen to the explanations and just played with his smartphone. When it came to signing the documents, he finally became eager. "If I sign this, the house will be in my name, right?" he asked. After I confirmed, he happily signed the documents. Once all the procedures are completed, both the house and the mortgage will finally be Eric's. I've explained it several times, but I wonder if Eric has truly realized it. He was ecstatically reporting to Rachel, Kelly, and Kyle. Even after hearing this, how can they still believe that Eric works at a major corporation and I'm unemployed? I watched this scene with a feeling of astonishment. After changing the house and mortgage to his name, I filed for divorce. "We're going on a trip to celebrate this, so you better move out while we're gone," Eric said. Waiting for the procedures to finalize, Eric took Rachel, Kelly, and Kyle on a ridiculous divorce celebration trip. They were apparently going abroad and wouldn't be back for about 15 days. During that time, I sold all the furniture and appliances I had brought into the house and packed my belongings into the car, ready to leave while handling various procedures in parallel. I was also looking for a new house and moved immediately after packing my belongings. The place I chose for my fresh start is the top floor of a high-rise condo. It was a stroke of luck that this condo worth about $8 million was available. However, given the timing, I thought it must have become available just for me, and I decided to boldly purchase it. For the past few years living with Rachel, Kyle, and Eric had been stressful, so I was thrilled about my new life ahead. In fact, I had an inheritance left by my deceased parents. I had been investing using that inheritance even before marrying Eric. Initially intended as just a way to earn some pocket money, these investments turned out to be a huge success, and now my assets amount to several $1,000,000. I had planned to use that money for a relaxed early retirement with Eric in the future. I had kept this asset a secret, intending to surprise Eric, but now I'm truly glad I never mentioned it. If I had told them, Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly might have joined forces to take my assets. Living with that family, I painfully learned just how careless they are with money. The house I lived in with Eric and his parents was decorated mainly based on their preferences, so it wasn't to my taste. With the move to the condo, I took the opportunity to create a space I love, carefully crafting the interior to my liking. Now it has become the perfect space surrounded only by things I adore. Above all, there's no one around to make snide Eric, so I can happily work from home. Once things settle down, I'm planning to join a cooking class or yoga studio. Finally, in this enjoyable and free time, I have regained a peaceful mind for the first time in years. The call from Eric came the night they returned from their trip abroad. He must have realized that the furniture and appliances were gone upon returning home. He demanded them back, but I paid no attention. Everything was bought with my money, so it's my choice to do what I want with it. I didn't want to leave anything of mine in the house of those who had caused me so much suffering, not even the furniture and appliances. Of course, they were unnecessary for my new home. When I told Eric that I had already sold them, he still demanded I buy them back immediately. It's impossible. You, working at a major corporation, should just buy new ones, I retorted and then hung up the phone. That day, Eric called several times, but I ignored all of his calls. Months had passed since Eric and his family returned from their overseas trip. I had completely forgotten about my previous life and was having a great time getting along well with my neighbors. That day, I was returning from a cooking class I attended, invited by a friend who lived on the floor below. Suddenly, I received a call from Eric. Although I was suspicious, I answered, thinking there might be an issue with paperwork that needed attention. As soon as I answered, Eric shouted in a loud voice, "What is this all about?" It was just like the day they returned from their overseas trip. Wondering if there was anything else besides the furniture and appliances that could have angered my husband, I decided to listen closely. It turns out he had finally noticed the amount of the loan repayments when he opened a letter that had arrived at the house. He saw that the loan repayment amount was listed as $7,500 per month, which is why he called in a panic. "Wasn't the loan already paid off?" he exclaimed. "Of course not. The bank explained everything clearly, didn't they?" I replied. "That's impossible. I never heard about it." "With the fire insurance in your savings, why didn't you pay off the mortgage?" he shouted. "No way, that's impossible. Do you even realize how much that house was worth?" I responded. Shockingly, it seems Eric believed the mortgage was already paid off, despite the bank's detailed explanation, which he had nodded to. He was apparently under a different impression. I was sitting right next to him, watching and listening, so I remember it well. Even if Eric wasn't paying attention, he had already signed the mortgage transfer, so it was too late now. Eric kept trying to find a way out of the mortgage payments, but there was nothing I could do about it. Eventually, he seemed to realize that he had no choice but to repay the loan and fell silent, seemingly frustrated. "I thought you'd be struggling to find a place to live," Eric said, clearly under the impression that I was in a dire situation. The reason Eric could freely spend his salary until now was because I was the one covering our living expenses. Even after our divorce, I have no trouble living on my own. It's too late for him to realize that he was relying on me for everything. I wondered what kind of life my pretentious ex-husband Eric had been leading these past few months with his parents, Rachel and Kyle. Most likely, they were living luxuriously, doing whatever Kelly suggested, and then he realized there was a mortgage to be paid. I wonder what Eric is going to do now, I thought, as if it were someone else's problem, since we're practically strangers now. I didn't care at all about how much trouble my ex-husband and his parents, Rachel and Kyle, were in. Seeing him so frustrated, I decided to tell him the truth. Too bad, I moved into a luxury condo with the money I made from a successful investment. While he was speechless, I hung up the phone. There were no calls from him after that, so I thought he had managed somehow. But then, out of the blue, he called again. When I answered, wondering what it was about this time, it turned out their house had been seized, and he was in a panic. In the background, I could hear the desperate voices of his parents, Rachel and Kyle, and his sister, Kelly. "What should I do? Help me, Lauren," my ex-husband pleaded desperately. A person claiming to be an enforcement officer was visiting their house, and I could hear Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly addressing the officer in the background. According to this officer, the house was about to be put up for auction, with details like the auction date and bidding period to be decided once the auctioneer was determined. After the ownership transferred, my ex-husband and his family would be evicted from the house. I thought they must have received warning letters leading up to this, but when I asked my ex-husband, he sounded confused and said they hadn't arrived. However, that couldn't be right, and after persistent questioning, he finally admitted in a small voice, maybe they did arrive. It turned out he had intentionally ignored the letters, realizing they were about loan repayments. The envelopes were already open before I saw them. I thought someone was taking care of the payments. Probably Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly thought the same as my ex-husband. Eventually, a demand for the lump sum repayment of the loan arrived, and it seems my ex-husband and his family were aware of it, but continued to ignore it, thinking someone else would pay it. And so the house was finally seized. Can't you do something now, like pay it off? You could pull everyone's savings together. There's got to be a way, he begged. I couldn't hide my frustration at my ex-husband's helpless tone. When I suggested they pool their savings to pay off the loan, all he could say was, "It's impossible." Apparently, Rachel and Kyle had squandered their savings on an extravagant overseas trip and were planning to rely on their son, who they thought worked at a big company, for their future. It was all just their assumption. Kelly, his sister, who claimed she quit her job to come back home, was actually fired for embezzling company funds. She talked as if she had been hugely successful in the city, but in reality, she was just a modestly paid accountant in a small to mid-sized company. She got hooked on visiting nightclubs and gradually embezzled money from her company to splurge on them. Even though she had returned home relying on her parents, Rachel and Kyle, she had the nerve to make grand claims. As for my ex-husband, after our divorce, he pretended to be working at a large corporation and started dipping into his savings to cover living expenses. Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly lived lavishly, and the money he had saved while we were married was completely gone. Then came the demand for the lump sum repayment of the loan. As their financial situations came to light, it seemed like the focus shifted from the court case to blaming each other. In the midst of this, my ex-husband started clinging to me. "Please, Lauren, you're living in that high-rise luxury condo now, right? Let's all live together there again." I refused. "We're divorced now, and as far as I'm concerned, we're strangers." Although I had felt a bit sorry for him earlier, I definitely didn't want to live with those people ever again. Hearing the voices of my ex-in-laws, Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly, in the background, I felt more resolved and firmly declined my ex-husband's offer. Upon hearing my refusal, Rachel, Kyle, and Kelly immediately started hurling insults at me. I heard various derogatory terms like heartless, scammer, and thief. Perhaps out of spite for being rejected, my ex-husband joined them in berating me. The noise over the phone was unbearable. Despite everything being the result of their own actions, there was no sign of remorse from them. Eventually, all four of them started blaming each other, leaving me out of it and arguing among themselves. I decided then and there to never involve myself with these people again. I quietly hung up the phone and blocked my ex-husband's number. A few days later, I came across a concerning headline in a corner of the newspaper. The article about a father and son getting into a fistfight and the police being called made me suspect it was about my ex-husband and his father. I decided to contact a mutual acquaintance who lives near my ex-in-law's home. Sure enough, the incident reported in the newspaper was about them, and it happened after I hung up the phone on my ex-husband. The article mentioned that a neighbor noticed the fight and called the police, leading to their arrest. My ex-husband, his father, Rachel, and Kelly, who tried to intervene, all sustained injuries that would take about 3 weeks to heal completely. After receiving a stern warning from the police, they were released. However, the incident making the newspapers meant my ex-husband faced severe reprimands at his workplace, although he wasn't fired. The cause of the fight was exaggerated and quickly spread throughout the company. My ex-husband feels uncomfortable at work, but can't afford to quite due to financial needs. Eventually, a buyer was found for their house, and they were forced to move out. They managed to find a new place, but it's an old, cramped, bug-infested apartment, a far cry from their previous home. The family of 4 began their new life there. Bugs appearing daily in the rooms are causing Kelly and Rachel to make such a fuss that they have already received complaints from the neighbors. They tried to work and rent a new house quickly, but both in-laws and Kelly seemed to get into trouble at work and end up being fired. Especially Kelly, with her past of embezzling company funds becoming widely known, is finding it difficult to get rehired. It looks like they will have to continue living on my ex-husband's income alone. My ex-husband seems to be trying to find out where I live, asking our mutual acquaintances persistently. They have warned me to be careful. Even if my ex-husband finds my condo, he'll just be turned away by the full-time concierge. I gratefully accepted the advice from my acquaintance and made sure to ask the concierge to be on the lookout. With this, the turmoil with my ex-husband and his family finally comes to an end. It hasn't even been a year since I left that house, but it already feels like a distant past event. I've completely adapted to life in my luxury condo, enjoying my days filled with hobbies and work. I plan to enjoy my carefree single life for a while without thinking about marriage. I'm Maud, and until I turned 33, the most exciting thing in my life was when the accounting firm I worked for switched from PC to Mac. Not exactly thrilling, right? But then everything changed at a friend's birthday party. That night, I stood in the corner of a cramped living room, holding a soda and feeling uncomfortable in my too-tight dress. The music was loud, way too loud for talking, but perfect for him, Charles. He was taller than most people, which is probably why he saw me. He walked over with confidence that made my heart skip a beat. "Hey, you're Maud, right?" His voice was clear, even over the loud bass. Yeah, and you are?" I sipped my drink, trying to look calm. "Charles, I see you around. Mind if I join you?" He didn't wait for an answer, just stood next to me. "Not at all," I said, my voice nearly drowned out by the latest pop song blaring through the speakers. "So, Maud, what brings you here tonight?" he asked, leaning in. His tone was casual, but his eyes were intense. "Just here to celebrate Jessica's birthday. You know her long?" "Yeah, went to college with her. She keeps inviting me to these things. Can't say no, can I?" We laughed, and it felt natural, easy. "I get it. I work with her. She's kind of hard to say no to." "An accountant, right?" She mentioned it. He nodded like he already knew. "That's right. Numbers are my game," I joked, even though I usually found nothing funny about spreadsheets. "Sounds thrilling," he grinned, and I couldn't tell if he was teasing me or not. "Oh, absolutely. It's all wild parties and high stakes in the accounting world." We laughed again, and I felt at the ease of talking to someone genuinely interested in what I had to say. It was new, exciting, and a bit scary. "You want to grab some air?" he suggested, nodding towards the backyard. I nodded, grateful to escape the noise. Outside, the cool air was a relief. "So, what's a guy like you doing in a place like this?" I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Just looking for a good time, I guess, and maybe someone cool to hang out with," he said with a smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. We talked about everything and nothing: movies, books we liked, how he was into graphic design, but stuck in a corporate job he didn't love. It felt like we'd known each other for years. As the night wound down, he pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number? I'd really like to see you again, Maud." I hesitated, not used to this kind of attention, but something about him felt right. "Sure," I said, typing my number into his phone. He smiled, his whole face lighting up. "Great, I'll call you. We should go out, just the two of us." "Sounds good." I managed my stomach doing flips. I watched him go, a part of me still in disbelief that this was my life now. Maybe turning 33 wasn't so bad after all. Maybe it was just the start of something truly great. The days after Charles' call felt like a blur. Before I knew it, I was getting ready for our first date. My nerves were all over the place since I didn't have much experience in this area. I chose a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but hoped it would do the trick. Charles picked me up at 7 sharp. His car was a clean, well-kept sedan. Nothing flashy, but it suited him. As I got in, he flashed me a smile that could knock you sideways. You look great, Maud. Thanks, I mumbled, my face probably red as a tomato. You look nice too. Dinner was at this cozy little French place he knew. The food smelled amazing, but my stomach was doing somersaults. We ordered pasta him with some fancy sauce and me with plain old marinara. So, Maud, tell me something about you that no one else knows, he said, twirling his spaghetti expertly onto his fork. I chuckled, playing with my food more than eating it. Well, I'm pretty boring, but I guess not everyone knows I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute. He raised his eyebrows. Really now? That's pretty cool. You'll have to show me sometime. Sure, I said, starting to relax a little. What about you? Any hidden talents? I make a mean breakfast burrito, he boasted with a grin. Best you'll ever have. I'll take your word for it. Maybe you can prove it sometime. I teased. The conversation flowed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We saw each other constantly. Charles would come over after work, and I'd meet him for lunch near his office. He showed me his favorite spots around town, little nooks I'd never noticed before. It was like seeing the city for the first time. Things took a serious turn when he invited me to meet his parents, Brian and Camille. They lived in a small, cozy house full of photos and little decorations. Camille hugged me the second we walked in. Oh, we've heard so much about you, dear, she said, squeezing my shoulders. She's lovely, Charles said, and I could tell he was pleased. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation was non-stop. So, Maud, Charles tells us you're an accountant. That must be interesting, Brian said, passing me the potatoes. It has its moments, I replied. Mostly just numbers, but I like the order of it. And how's your family? Camille asked, genuinely interested. They're good, thanks. My dad's a businessman, always busy, but he's been really supportive of me. It was all happening fast, but it felt right. It was as if everything in my life had been leading up to this meeting. Charles feeling like someone finally saw me for who I was, not just some plain Jane accountant. One evening, a few months into our whirlwind romance, we were walking along the riverbank. The city lights reflected off the water, and it was pretty in a postcard kind of way. Maud, I've been thinking, he started, stopping and facing me. Yeah, I asked, my heart starting to race. I don't want to wait any longer. I know this is fast, but will you marry me? Just like that, my world changed. No hesitation, no doubt, just a simple, yes, Charles, I'll marry you. The whirlwind didn't stop there. Soon after, I introduced Charles to my father. He took to Charles immediately, appreciating his straightforward manner and obvious affection for me. He's a good man, Maud, Dad said, giving his approval, which meant the world to me. So we got married. It was a modest wedding, nothing too extravagant, but it was perfect for us. I even found myself loving the way I looked in my wedding dress, something I'd never imagined. Smiling wide, I posted photos on my social media, sharing my joy with friends and family. After the wedding, life didn't slow down, it picked up pace. Charles and I barely had time to savor our newlywed bliss before he suggested something big. Hey Maud, I've been thinking, he said one evening as we unpacked another box of wedding gifts in our cramped apartment. How about we move in with my folks? I paused, holding a coffee mug in my hand. Live with your parents? He nodded, looking serious. Yeah, they're not getting any younger, and I'd feel better if we were around to help out. Plus, it would save us some money on rent. It made sense, but moving in with the in-laws, that was sitcom territory. Are you sure they'd want us there all the time? Absolutely, he assured me. Mom's been hinting about it ever since we got engaged. Come on, it'll be good. 3 weeks later, there we were, pulling up to his parents' house with our lives packed into a bunch of boxes. Charles's mom, Camille, was waving from the porch before we even got out of the car. Oh, Maud, we're so thrilled to have you both here, she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that was a bit too tight. Brian, Charles's dad, clapped him on the back. "Welcome home, son, and you too, Maud." The house was cozy, stuffed with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum of the 1973s. I tried to keep a smile on my face, but I was already missing our little apartment. Charles sensed my hesitation. "It's going to be great, you'll see," he whispered as we carried boxes inside. The first few days were an adjustment. Camille was constantly hovering, always popping into our room to ask if we needed anything. "Just making sure you're comfortable," she'd chirp, while I tried not to cringe at the invasion of privacy. One evening, we all sat down for dinner: Charles, me, Brian, and Camille. The conversation was painfully mundane until Charles dropped another bomb. "So the house needs some major repairs," he announced casually between bites of meatloaf. I choked on my mashed potatoes. "Repairs?" "Yeah, the roof's a mess, and the plumbing's from the Dark Ages," he said. Brian nodded solemnly. "We were thinking," Charles continued, avoiding my gaze, "that maybe we could all chip in for the costs." I glanced at Camille, who was suddenly very interested in her plate. "All of us?" "Well, I just got this pay cut at work," Charles muttered, "so I'm a bit strapped at the moment." There it was. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "I'll see what I can do," I managed to say, even though I wanted to say much more. Camille perked up, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, Maud, that would be so helpful. You're such an angel." The next few weeks were a blur of contractors and repairs. I wrote checks and smiled through gritted teeth as Camille gushed about how wonderful the house was looking. Brian slapped me on the back. "You're really part of the family now, Maud." Part of the family, sure, the part that pays for everything. One particularly grueling day, after yet another round of expensive decisions, I felt completely drained. I collapsed on our bed, exhausted. Charles came in and sat beside me. "Thanks for handling all this, Maud," he said, sounding almost sincere. "It's fine," I lied, staring at the ceiling. "I just didn't realize how much it would be." He squeezed my hand. "It'll all be worth it. This is for our future, right?" "Our future," I echoed, not sure whose future we were building anymore. As I lay there listening to Charles's steady breathing, I couldn't help but wonder if moving in was the right decision. But there was no going back now. I was in this deep and had to see it through, whatever the cost. After the renovations, the house looked great, like something out of a magazine. Despite the financial strain, I felt a bit of pride looking around. We decided to throw a small dinner party to celebrate, just the four of us. That's when everything took an unexpected turn. We were in the middle of dinner, laughing and sharing stories, when Camille suddenly got quiet. The room felt heavy all of a sudden. She looked at Brian, then at us, and her eyes were teary. "We need to tell you both something important," she said, her voice shaky. Charles and I exchanged looks. "What's going on?" I asked, my stomach tightening. Brian took a deep breath. "The house? It's mortgaged, heavily mortgaged. We owe $300,000, and the bank could take it away if we don't settle the debt in 3 months. My fork clattered to my plate. "What? You mean all the repairs we just paid for?" Camille started sobbing. We were ashamed and thought we could manage it, but after the repairs and everything, there's just no way. I felt like I was in a bad dream. All the money, all the effort, and it was for a house that wasn't even secure. "So, what are you saying now?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "Well," Charles started, his eyes avoiding mine. "I was hoping maybe, Maud, you could talk to your father." "Are you serious?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Ask my dad for $300,000? It's just, after his help, the house would be secure for us, for our future," Charles pleaded. Camille's sobbing grew louder, making me feel like the villain in this crazy drama. "Please, Maud, it's our home. We've spent decades in this house." I was furious, but the tears and the pleading wore me down. "I'll think about it," I finally muttered, feeling trapped. The next day, I called my dad, hesitantly explaining the situation. To my surprise, he agreed to help, but on one condition. I'll give the money, Maud, but only with a formal agreement, a receipt. I want everything documented. When I told Charles about my dad's condition, he wasn't happy. Why does it have to be so formal? Can't he just trust us? It's $300,000, Charles. It's a lot of money, and he's just being cautious, I argued, feeling the distance between us grow. He'll get his paperwork, Charles muttered, clearly annoyed. The paperwork was drawn up, and the money was transferred. Camille and Brian were relieved, constantly thanking me, but the air between Charles and me had changed. There was a coldness that wasn't there before. Just when I thought my life couldn't get any darker, tragedy struck suddenly. Maud, it's your Kayla, it signs. Her voice came through the line shaky and choked. Your dad, he had a heart attack. It's bad. My heart dropped to my stomach. What? How is he? He didn't make it. Honey, I'm so sorry. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. No, that can't be right. I mumbled, numb. I hung up and turned to find Charles standing in the doorway. What's wrong? He asked, his voice low. My dad, he's gone. I managed to say before everything inside me broke and I started sobbing. Charles came over and put his arm around me, but it felt like being hugged by a stranger. I'm sorry, Maud, he said, and it sounded sincere, but I was too lost in my grief to really hear him. Exhausted from another long day of funeral planning and dealing with the agency, I came home earlier than usual. I expected the house to be quiet, but as I inserted my key into the front door, I heard voices from the living room. It was Charles, his tone dripping with frustration and disgust, talking to his parents. I can't do this anymore. Living with her is driving me nuts. It's too much, Charles complained. His mom, usually so sweet and understanding, replied in a stern whisper, You have to hold on a bit longer, Charles. We need to figure out what to do with those receipts your father-in-law had. Maud has them now. The sooner I get out, the better. I'll grab those receipts and destroy them, and then I'll start all over again with that rich beauty I told you about. Charles's voice was cold and calculated. I felt a chill run down my spine. Here I was mourning my father, while the people I thought I could trust were plotting behind my back. I realized the family I lived with was plotting behind my back. They weren't the loving family I thought I married into. Instead, they saw me as a way to fix their financial troubles. Rage mixed with shock, but I knew I had to keep my cool. So I slammed the door loudly as if I had just come in, disrupting their scheming. Oh, Maud, you're back early. How did everything go with the funeral plans? Camille's voice shifted instantly to one of concern, her eyes wide with fake innocence. I forced a smile, my stomach turning. It's all coming together. Thanks for asking. As I spoke, I could see the quick glances they shot each other, their faces a mask of fake concern. It made my skin crawl knowing their true colors. But I realized that showing my cards now wouldn't help. I needed to be smart. I needed to protect what was mine and possibly even get some justice for their deceit. The funeral was somber, the air heavy with grief and murmured condolences. But as the ceremony wrapped up and we returned to Charles's parents' house, the true colors of the family I married into began to show. As we gathered in the living room, sipping on lukewarm coffee, Charles's demeanor shifted. His usually charming facade crumbled away, revealing something more sinister. With a cold laugh, he looked straight at me and dropped the bomb. Maud, pack your things. You need to get out. I've got someone else now, someone better. His words should have felt like a slap. I pretended to be stunned, but before I could respond, Camille chimed in with a snide giggle. We've really had enough of you, dear. We only put up with you for your money. What about the house? I asked, feigning innocence. The house that I paid to fix, the $300,000 I poured into it. Camille laughed harder, as if I'd told the best joke of the year. Oh, sweetie, this house is ours. You're nothing here. Charles's smirk widened. And those receipts you're so proud of. Found them in your dad's house and burned them. They're gone. For a moment, I let them believe they had won, but then I couldn't help it. I burst into laughter, my reaction confusing them, their smiles faltering. "Why are you laughing? What's so funny?" Charles demanded. I wiped a tear from my eye, still chuckling. "You three are just pathetic. You think you're so clever. The receipts you destroyed. They were copies. The real ones are safe with my lawyer." The color drained from their faces. Charles's arrogance turned to panic. "You can't prove anything," he stammered. "I can, and I will," I shot back, my voice steady and firm. "Now, I want my money back, all of it, or my next call is to the police." Charles and Brian looked at each other, their earlier confidence replaced by fear. Brian, usually so bold and brash, began to plead. "Maud, please, let's talk about this. We can sort something out." With the truth out and leverage in my hands, negotiations with Charles and his parents dragged on longer than I expected. It was clear they were trying every angle to sway the terms in their favor, but I wasn't about to budge. "Look, it's simple," I stated firmly during one of our many discussions at their now legally mine kitchen table. "The house gets transferred to my name in exchange for the money. That's the deal. No more games." Finally, they relented. We all agreed that the best course of action was to make everything official and legal. I insisted that everything be documented by a lawyer and confirmed with the proper papers. "I want no corners cut," I emphasized. At the lawyer's office, the atmosphere was tense as documents were signed and notarized. I watched closely as each signature was applied, ensuring there was no room for further deceit. Once everything was finalized, I collected the documents related to the transfer and turned to Charles's mother, who looked deflated yet somehow still carried a hint of her former haughtiness. "I'll be keeping these in a safe place," I said, holding up the papers before slipping them into a folder, just to ensure no one is tempted to pull any stunts. With the legalities handled, the divorce proceedings were straightforward. Charles was quiet, his earlier arrogance nowhere to be seen. When the final papers were signed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. A chapter closed. On the day they moved out, I stood on the porch of my now fully owned house and watched Charles, his mom, and Dad carry their belongings to a rental van. Their movements were slow, the mood somber. I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This wasn't how I imagined my marriage ending, but under the circumstances, it was the best possible outcome. After everything settled down and I began to enjoy my newfound peace, word got back to me through friends about Charles and his situation. Apparently, the grass wasn't greener on the other side. His mistress had dumped him not long after our divorce, and his parents were now crammed into a tiny apartment, a big downgrade from the comfortable house they once had. It seemed karma had caught up with them quicker than I expected. Despite their situation, they started reaching out to me, bombarding me with calls and messages, probably hoping to weasel their way back into my life or at least my house. But I was done with their deceit. I blocked their numbers without a second thought and blacklisted them on all social media. It was liberating to cut the final threads that connected us. One afternoon, as I was enjoying a quiet moment with a book in my living room, there was a knock at my door. Peering through the peephole, I saw Charles standing there, a pathetic figure holding a bouquet of flowers. The audacity of it made me scoff. Opening the door, I couldn't help but laugh outright at the sight of him. "Really, Charles? Flowers?" He shuffled uncomfortably, the bouquet seeming to wilt along with his spirits. "Maud, I've realized so many things. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Remember when you told me I disgusted you?" I interrupted, leaning against the doorframe, not hiding my amusement at his discomfort. "What changed, Charles? Run out of options?" He looked down, the shame clear on his face. I made mistakes, but I'm here to make things right." I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for him. "Almost. You're not here to make things right, Charles. You're just desperate to get back to your comfortable life. But guess what? That life doesn't exist anymore, not for you." His face fell, and he took a step back as if my words were physical blows. "Maud, please." "Save it." I cut him off sharply. "I want you to leave. Don't come back here. We're done. Forever." Charles stood there for a second longer, his hope visibly crumbling. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched in defeat. I returned to my book, feeling a sense of finality and relief. I smiled to myself, feeling the quiet of the house wrap around me like a comforting blanket. It was such a stark contrast to the chaos that once filled this space. The constant noise, the tension, the deceit, all of it was gone now. I could finally breathe deeply without the weight of worry on my chest. I was finally at peace, living life on my terms. I glanced around the room, taking in the calm atmosphere. The sun streamed in through the windows, casting a warm glow over everything. I realized how much I loved this house now that it was truly mine. The walls, once witnesses to arguments and schemes, now seemed to echo with serenity and contentment. I thought back to the days of turmoil and manipulation, remembering how trapped I felt. Charles and his family had taken so much from me, both emotionally and financially. But now they were out of my life for good. No bouquet of flowers or sweet talk could change that. Their attempts to manipulate me were over. As I sipped my tea and returned to my book, I felt a sense of triumph. I had faced betrayal and heartbreak, but I had come out stronger on the other side. I had taken control of my life and my future. The peace I felt now was well-earned and deeply cherished. I was truly finally free. Free from lies, free from deceit, and free to live my life as I chose. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities and opportunities. I smiled again, knowing that whatever came next, I was ready for it. A few weeks ago, I lost my dad after he struggled with his health for a long time. My name is Kelly, and sometimes I find myself wishing I could have introduced him to his grandchildren. This thought always brings a heavy sigh. 5 years ago, when I was 37, I got married. On that happy day, my dad and I made a special promise I would be the first to tell him if I was expecting. Sadly, that's a promise I will never be able to keep, and it's the biggest regret I have about my dad. His illness was discovered a year ago, and since then, I did everything I could to be there for him. I visited our childhood home more often, spent many hours at the hospital with my mom, and made sure to call or video chat even more. Despite all of this, I sometimes wonder if it was enough. I'd often think to myself, could I have done more? Lost in thought, I whispered these words, and my mom, always supportive, comforted me, saying, "Kelly, you did everything you could." Your dad knew that, and he was proud. Just then, my sister Julia walked in with a man who looked to be about 45, probably the lawyer. "This is Scott, the attorney," she introduced him, and my mom quickly offered him a seat. As soon as we all sat down, Julia couldn't hold back and mentioned that the lawyer said Dad left us a significant inheritance. I couldn't help but respond, "Julia, you know it's not all yours." That comment instantly changed the mood. My sister and I have always had a rocky relationship, made worse by our dad's illness. Her refusal to visit our dad, even though I tried to bring them closer, didn't help. Her attitude has always been a problem, and it became even more noticeable during these difficult times. Looking back, my words to her might have been too harsh, driven by my worry for our father. However, her response didn't make things better. "You're an adult. There's no need to be so stubborn," I pointed out, to which she snapped back, "I'm not being stubborn. Living in the city and traveling to the countryside isn't as simple as you think. It's just a 5-hour drive." I responded, but she argued back, saying that those 5 hours aren't just about time, it costs money. And yes, money is important to her. She told me she's busy and asked me to stop bothering her. That ended our conversation. Despite the distance, I always thought she could make an effort to visit now and then. This belief was a big reason why our relationship started to fall apart. In the end, she never visited our father, and the distance between us only grew. The tension in the room increased until the lawyer stepped in and suggested we all take a moment to calm down. I apologized, saying, "I'm sorry," which seemed to make things a bit better. The lawyer then explained, "As I mentioned over the phone, I'm here about your father's will." My mother, looking confused, asked quietly, "When was this arranged?" The lawyer replied, "A few weeks before he passed. Your father reached out to me. He asked you to come to the hospital?" My mother asked. The lawyer answered, "Yes, I drafted the will there with him, and his primary doctor was there too. It was arranged that the doctor would notify me after your father passed, which is why I contacted you now." The lawyer then took out a white envelope and placed it in front of us. Recognizing my father's handwriting on the envelope, I whispered, "That's definitely Dad's handwriting." Julia, visibly impatient, demanded, "Just get on with it." "What does it say? You know I'm busy." The lawyer, with a slight smile, opened the envelope. Inside, there was a single piece of paper outlining the inheritance, the house, some land, some savings, and a storage shed. We knew about the house and the land, but the mention of a storage shed was new to me. My sister, frustrated, turned to the lawyer and asked, "Wait, what about the farm?" The lawyer echoed, a bit surprised, "Yes, the farm." I explained, our father used to work on it as a hobby. He had run a successful business in a nearby town, but decided to slow down after turning 55, thinking about closing the company to spend more time on his hobbies, including the farm. This new mention of the farm added another layer to our father's legacy and what he left behind during my high school years. I remember saying that I wanted to take life a bit slower. My sister, who was in college at the time, didn't agree with this more relaxed approach. But both my mom and I, worried about my dad's health, supported the idea. "Don't worry about money, Julia. We've got plenty of savings," my dad reassured her. Though hesitant, she eventually agreed. After that conversation, my dad did wind down his business and started farming close to our home. "There's something fulfilling about working with the land," he would say, his face lighting up with joy. Seeing how happy he was made me feel that we made the right choice, though Julia seemed less convinced. Despite promising to come back home after graduation, Julia chose to build her career near her university and eventually married the CEO of an IT firm she met through her job. That's how things were when my father took up farming until his health started to decline. Julia insisted that the farm be included in the inheritance. At her insistence, the lawyer checked the documents and found that the farm was actually leased land. I had mistakenly thought we owned a large piece of land. Julia seemed disappointed by this discovery, but knowing little about farming ourselves, I felt it might be for the best. The discussion then turned to how the inheritance would be divided. "The house and the surrounding land will go to the wife," the lawyer said. Julia smirked, probably thinking about how the remaining assets would be split. "The rest, including the savings and the storage shed, should be divided between you three," the lawyer suggested. "Savings? That means cash, right?" "I'll take that," Julia said, focusing on the money. "The total savings amount to approximately $300,000, and this sum is not subject to inheritance tax," the lawyer informed us. "I want the $300,000 in cash," Julia declared, feeling like she had won. But this didn't sit well with me, and I spoke up. "Hold on, I don't agree. Why should you get all the cash?" I protested. "Because I'm the eldest," she argued, as if that settled it. "Fine, you can have the storage shed. What's that even worth anyway?" she added dismissively, turning back to the lawyer for more details. "It's the shed next to the farm. Whoever inherits it will own the structure, the land it's on, and anything inside it," the lawyer explained. Suddenly, Julia's attitude changed when she heard there was additional land. It struck me as odd that, even though she was married to a successful CEO, her desire for more seemed never-ending. As the lawyer explained more about the storage shed, he mentioned it came with a small piece of land, about 90 square feet, roughly the size of a small bedroom. He then laid out some photos of the shed for us to see, showing both the outside and inside. The shed looked quite run down from the outside, and inside it only had simple gardening tools like hoses, scissors, and shovels, nothing that seemed particularly valuable. My sister made a face of disgust when she saw the photos. "I don't want this," she said, looking closely at the images. They really just showed everyday items, more valuable for their memories than for money. "Fine, you take the cash. I want nothing to do with that old shed," she said, clearly wanting to distance herself from what she saw as a worthless inheritance. "Hold on, that seems unfair," I protested, realizing how uneven the division was. My sister quickly agreed to take the cash, knowing it was the more valuable option, leaving me with what she saw as worthless. Her insistence made me feel trapped, especially when my mother said, "As long as Julia doesn't complain later, I see no problem with this arrangement." Complain? Why would I? Julia quickly agreed, satisfied with getting the cash, leaving me with the shed. I couldn't hide my disappointment, but before I could argue more, Julia dismissed my concerns, accusing me of being too sentimental. "You care more about our father than money, right?" she challenged, leaving me momentarily speechless. It's true that family should be valued over money, but her quick decision left me feeling unsettled. In the end, my mother inherited the house and land, Julia happily took all of Dad's savings, and I was left with the neglected shed. After agreeing to the division, Julia even signed a document promising not to dispute how the inheritance was split, laughing confidently as she did so. I couldn't contain my frustration and later expressed my disappointment to my mother. "Why didn't you support me?" I asked, feeling let down. My mother insisted she had helped, claiming that her involvement made sure I got the shed. "But I'm not happy with just the shed," I argued, unable to see its value. "You might find something unexpectedly wonderful if you give it a chance," my mom suggested, trying to be optimistic. Despite my frustrations, her words sparked a faint glimmer of hope. Maybe there was more to the shed than it seemed, a thought that left me wondering. I tried to make sense of the day's events. After getting the key from the lawyer, I walked to the shed, which was beside a field about 15 minutes away from our house. The path was quiet and rarely used, adding to the peaceful yet somber atmosphere. The field, which my father had leased until he recently went into the hospital, was now empty, giving the place an untouched and solemn feeling. When I unlocked the shed, I was greeted by a thick layer of dust, showing how long it had been neglected. "Wow, it's really dusty," I said, noticing the heavy scent of disuse in the air. Even though I felt a bit disappointed at first, I still hoped to find something special of my father's, maybe a keepsake hidden inside. As I looked around the shed, it quickly became clear that it was just a simple space filled with farming tools. These items might have held sentimental value, but they didn't seem particularly special at first glance. I thought to myself, maybe I should just take what's inside for now, as I scanned the dim and cluttered surroundings. Then I noticed something odd about the shed's size. It seemed smaller on the inside than it did from the outside, which puzzled me. Was it a trick of the light, or was my mind playing tricks on me? I stepped outside to get a better look, still curious about the strange difference. Driven by curiosity, I decided to explore the outside of the shed. As I walked around to the back, hidden among a dense group of trees, I found a second door. "Wait, another entrance?" I gasped. From inside the shed, there had been no sign of this door. It looked like there was only one way in and out. This discovery hinted at a hidden space, only accessible from this secret back door. A surge of excitement rushed through me. Could this be one of Dad's secrets? He loved surprising us, always finding joy in the unexpected, like the surprises he planned for my birthdays. The memories brought tears to my eyes as I re-entered the shed, determined to find the key to this hidden door. After a thorough search, I was ready to discover what lay beyond it. I found 4 keys cleverly hidden inside the handle of a shovel. Excited, I rushed to the back door and tried one of the keys. With a satisfying click, the door swung open. Inside this small, hidden space stood a large safe, alone and imposing. "Is this from Dad's company?" I wondered aloud, as a flood of questions filled my mind. What secrets did it hold? Was this my father's way of leaving a final piece of himself behind? The discovery hinted at parts of my father's life that I had yet to uncover, like a personal treasure hunt he had left for me to explore. I immediately recognized the safe as the one that used to sit in the corner of my father's office, a familiar sight from my childhood. Seeing it brought a wave of nostalgia over me. This safe was a real connection to my father, making the inheritance feel even more meaningful. Knowing my dad, this felt like just the beginning of his final surprises for me. "There's got to be more," I whispered to myself as I used the 3rd key to unlock the safe. The door creaked open, revealing contents that left me completely amazed, an unexpected legacy. Realizing how important this discovery was, I quickly secured the safe and went to tell my mother. Later, with my husband's help, we moved the safe from my parents' home. It occurred to me that these valuable items, likely part of my inheritance, might have tax implications. Wanting to handle this properly, I decided to seek legal advice. Following the lawyer's suggestion, I contacted a certified public accountant, CPA, recommended by a friend to help navigate the possible tax issues. This professional took care of the complicated details, making sure everything was in order. A year passed as we dealt with these matters when, unexpectedly, my sister showed up at my home. Her visit was surprising, especially considering our strained relationship over the inheritance. I was just in the area, she claimed, but her uneasy behavior and the fact that we lived 20 minutes apart made her visit seem less than casual. Despite our complicated history, I invited her in. After serving coffee, she seemed restless and finally asked, "Did you win the lottery or something?" Her question puzzled me. I never played the lottery, and it wasn't the time for my husband's holiday bonus. "What are you getting at?" I asked, trying to understand her point. I finally asked her to clarify her strange accusations. Her mood shifted suddenly to irritation. "Are you making fun of me?" she accused. Her reaction confused me even more, as her question seemed completely unexpected. I had no idea what made her think I had come into a lot of money, especially since only my family knew about the mysterious contents of the safe. My sister was filled with curiosity about money, insisting that I must have received a significant amount. She told me about a recent conversation with our aunt in the city, who unknowingly sparked her curiosity. Our aunt mentioned receiving a $5,000 gift card from me as a thank you for visiting our father during his illness. This gesture led my sister to wildly speculate that I had stumbled upon some unexpected fortune. "You've come into some money, haven't you? Just admit it," she pressed, looking for answers. Understanding what had led to her questions, I sighed, which only irritated her more. "What's with the attitude? Are you making fun of me?" she demanded. I tried to explain that it was just a gesture of appreciation, but she questioned where the money for such gifts came from. I reminded her of the inheritance, specifically the dusty shed she had dismissed, and then revealed the discovery of the safe inside it, a real treasure trove left by our father. The safe contained a collection of valuable watches, a passion of our father's. Although I wasn't sure of their exact worth, it was clear they were valuable, especially considering the modest savings left behind. This revelation led to a discussion about the possibility of having to pay inheritance tax, a concern my mother had raised when she learned what was inside the safe. "What should I do, Mom?" I asked, seeking her advice. My mother suggested handling everything openly and honestly, reminding me that secrets like these usually come to light eventually. Following her advice, I contacted the lawyer we had previously consulted. The lawyer explained that the value of inherited items determines whether inheritance tax applies. This led me to take the responsible step of accurately declaring the inheritance and ensuring I was complying with all the legal and financial requirements of my newfound wealth by seeking professional advice. I found out that a certified public accountant, CPA, could help manage the valuation and tax obligations of the inherited watches for me. Trusting the CPA with this task, we discovered that the collection was worth an incredible $500,000. Because of their high value, it was clear that inheritance tax needed to be paid. The sensible advice was to keep only the watches that held sentimental value to me and sell the others to someone who could appreciate and afford them. This approach not only made financial sense, but also felt right emotionally. From the money made from the sale, I was able to cover the inheritance tax and also send gift cards to relatives who supported us during my father's illness. This is what had sparked my sister's curiosity. Among the keepsakes, I chose to keep my father's pocket watch. It wasn't worth much in terms of money, but it was rich in memories. I shared this story with my sister, showing her the pocket watch and trying to explain its sentimental value. However, her reaction was lukewarm. She seemed more interested in what was sold than what was kept. When she asked about the remaining watches and the safe, I told her it was our mother's house and explained its size and importance to our father's business. Her response was thoughtful, which left me feeling uneasy about her intentions. However, she left without asking any more questions, much to my relief, though I couldn't shake off an unsettling sense of worry. My fears were somewhat confirmed that very night when I received a distressing call from my mother, urging my husband and me to come to her house quickly. As we approached, the scene was alarming: red lights flashing in the darkness, police cars stationed outside. Pushing through the gathering crowd, I found my mother and learned what had happened. She'd been getting ready for bed when she heard strange noises that startled her. It sounded like someone was frantically searching through the house. With no one else home to help, my mother made a quick decision to escape through a window, driven by fear and desperation. Her description of the situation was unnerving, painting a picture of a night filled with panic and uncertainty. Under the cover of darkness, my mother had noticed the eerie glow of a flashlight moving inside the house, confirming her fears of a burglary. In a state of panic, she made her escape. She sought help from our neighbor, who, after seeing the suspicious activity, quickly called the police, convinced that a burglar was in the house. But the supposed intruder was actually my sister, Julia, who had decided to search the safe after hearing about my inheritance earlier that day. Without knowing her intentions, both my mother and the neighbor were understandably alarmed. When the police arrived, the situation escalated. Julia, caught off guard and feeling guilty, tried to flee the scene in a panic. Ironically, as she attempted to escape, she collided with the safe, causing it to tip over and trap her underneath. This accident led to her being rushed to the hospital with complaints of leg pain, leaving us all in disbelief over her reckless actions. After this chaos, my mother and I found ourselves apologizing to the responding officers for the misunderstanding. I also felt the need to inform Julia's husband about the incident, only to learn from him that Julia had been hiding a significant amount of debt due to her extravagant spending on luxury items. Their recent argument had ended with her storming out, determined to borrow money from our mom to settle her financial troubles. What we didn't know was that she had already used up her inheritance in an attempt to pay off her debt. Julia's husband, already stressed from discovering her financial mismanagement, declared his intention to divorce her after hearing about her latest escapade. This revelation explained Julia's desperate actions that night, which led to a tense scene at the hospital where her husband brought up the subject of divorce. The entire ordeal turned into a dramatic clash, highlighting the serious consequences of Julia's actions and the turmoil they caused in our family. Julia was adamant, insisting, "I'm not getting a divorce, absolutely not." But the reality of her situation became clear when her husband presented the divorce papers. Faced with undeniable evidence of their broken relationship, she had no choice but to sign them. Now confined to her hospital bed, with a mix of shock and resignation, she was flipping through a part-time job magazine, clearly thinking about how to tackle her debt with new employment. While this turn of events was unfortunate, it offered a small glimmer of hope that she might finally take responsibility for her actions after everything that had happened. I made an important decision to move back to my childhood home. The chaos had definitely made me worried about my mother's well-being, but there was also a happier reason behind my choice I found out I'm expecting. After a lot of discussion, my husband and I agreed that moving back would be the best decision. This way, we can have my mother's support as our family grows. Even though I regret that my father couldn't be part of this joyful news, I find comfort in believing he would have shared in our happiness. As I step into this new chapter, the excitement of welcoming a healthy child fills me with peace and hope for the future, despite the recent family troubles. Hey, my name's Sophia. Last year, I changed my status to MS and added a wedding band to my collection of courtroom victories. Slinging arguments before a judge is my zone, but I never thought I'd need a defense strategy for family dinners. Let me explain. My husband, Billy, is a mama's boy, and I get why. Mrs. Jerry, his mom, is the queen bee of their hive. She did the single mom hustle, raising 2 kids on her own. Mad props for that. Then there's his sister, Lauren. She thinks she's the center of the universe. I remember the first time I walked into their place. Billy had his arm around me like I was a trophy. The living room was like a shrine, with photos of Billy and Lauren everywhere. It felt cozy, but also like I was stepping onto a movie set where they'd been playing house for years. Suddenly, I was the unexpected guest. Mrs. Jerry greeted me with a tight-lipped smile, the kind that says, "I'm smiling because I have to, but I'd rather be scrubbing the bathroom grout with your toothbrush." She wore one of those floral dresses that screamed, "I'm the matriarch." "Sophia, dear, Billy's told us so much about you," she said, sizing me up like a car she's not sure she wants to buy. "Yeah, I've been looking forward to meeting the famous Mrs. Jerry. Billy's mom has done nothing but sing your praises," I said, trying to warm up the room. "Oh, how sweet," Lauren chimed in. She'd been eyeing me like a hawk since I walked in. "Tell us, Sophia, how's the lawyer life? I picture you in court like on TV, making bank. So, how much do you actually make?" I almost choked. Who asks that right away? I laughed because what else could I do? "Ah, you know, trade secret and all that," I shot back without missing a beat. Mrs. Jerry picked up the conversation like it was a relay race. "But surely you can give us a ballpark figure for family." Billy shot me a look that said, "Please don't be mad," but I kept my cool. If I had $1 for every time someone asked me that, I have enough to change the subject. I tried to smile in a friendly way. Mrs. Jerry snorted. "Yeah," she snorted. "Well, it's no secret what a teacher earns, right, Billy?" she asked. Billy sighed. "Mom, let's not do this now." "Right, right," she said, waving her hand like she was dismissing a servant. "Anyway, you'll be like family now. Sharing is caring and all that." I glanced at Billy. He had his help me face on. I knew then I wasn't just marrying Billy, I was joining some kind of domestic Cold War. A couple of weeks later, I was standing in our kitchen, wearing an apron and cooking Mrs. Jerry's famous chili recipe. Mrs. Jerry and Lauren had this habit of dropping by unannounced like they forgot it wasn't their house. "Your chili needs more heat," Mrs. Jerry said, poking at the ladle, "and less salt. Watch your husband's blood pressure." "Got it," I replied, but inside I was rolling my eyes so hard I could see my brain. Lauren was there too, leaning back on a stool like she was royalty. "You see this spot, Sophia. Cleanliness is next to godliness, isn't it, Mom?" Lauren said. Mrs. Jerry nodded like it was the gospel, and Lauren was mentally high-fiving herself. Funny, I cleaned this place this morning, I said, wiping the spot off the counter. Must have missed that one. Billy was in the other room, clueless, probably deep in some video game or sports stats. I decided it was time to fill him in on the home invasions. I poked my head in where he was slouched on the couch. Hey, you got a sec. What's up, babe? Billy flicked his eyes up for a moment, afraid he might miss a crucial play. Your mom and Lauren, they come in, take over, and nitpick everything I do. It's like they're looking for stuff to complain about, I said. Ah, Sophia, they mean well? You know they're just. Billy scratched his head. I'll talk to them. They'll chill out. Back in the kitchen, it felt like the final round of a cook-off where I was the only contestant and the judges were out for blood. So, Sophia, when's dinner? Billy must be starving, Lauren said, glancing at me like I was the help. Whenever the chili decides it's ready, I replied. I respond, but I keep my voice light. It's a tricky situation. Dinner lands on the table, and I scan their faces. Mrs. Jerry stirs her food around, inspecting every bean like it holds the secret to the universe. Bit different from how I make it, Mrs. Jerry finally says. That's code for nice try, but you're no match for me. Billy dives in though, bless him. Babe, this is awesome. Right, Ma? Lauren mutters, sure, and Mrs. Jerry just shrugs like she's agreeing with the worst food critic. After they leave, Billy is slapping his belly saying it's all good. I watch the door shut behind them, feeling tiny like I'm losing at a game I didn't sign up to play. The next time they pop over, it's the same old tune, like nothing changed. I must have been dreaming to think a few words from Billy might turn the tide. Still, I asked him to talk to his mother about boundaries. I thought getting married was the hard part. Fitting into Billy's family is the real challenge. They've got their own idea of family, and I'm not in it yet. If this is what married life is like, count me out of the honeymoon phase. It was one of those days where the clock seemed to tick slower than syrup drips from a bottle. That's when my phone decided to ring. Glancing at the caller ID, my heart sank. It was Mrs. Jerry again. Sophia. Her voice was stern, and it did nothing for my headache. You think you can just snatch Billy away from us, huh? Her words stung like vinegar on a paper cut. I glanced over at Billy, hoping he'd at least flinch at his mother's tone. Nothing. He's glued to the TV screen, a statue with a heartbeat. Mrs. Jerry, it's not like that. We're just trying to set up some boundaries, I said, my voice thin. Boundaries, she fumed. That's just a fancy word for shutting us out. You can't do that to us, to me. He's my son. I blinked back frustration. Billy was still silent, looking like someone shrunk his spine in the wash. Listen, it's normal for married folks to want their own space. I tried to keep the edge out of my tone. Space. He's never needed space before you came, she retorted sharply. Each word chipped away at my patience. That's when Billy decided to speak up, but not to back me up. No, Mom, everything's okay. Sophia's not, she's not being unreasonable, I guess, he said, but his voice was like wet cardboard. Billy, I just can't believe this. First, Lauren tells me Sophia is making a fuss over our visits, and now this. Mrs. Jerry sounded hurt, and Billy jumped on that. Lauren said that. Billy turned to me, eyebrows raised, as if I was the one causing trouble. Yeah, she did, and I think she's right. Family is family, Billy. You can't just turn your back on us. She pressed harder, knowing she was pulling him in. I saw my husband, the man I loved, deflate like a balloon 3 days after a party. The call ended with promises of another family meeting that felt more like a summit to discuss the terms of my surrender. After the call, it was as if nothing had happened. Billy settled back on the couch, resuming his championship in channel surfing. Mrs. Jerry continued her visits, each one a master class in thinly veiled jabs. And Lauren. She might as well have been a puppet master, always getting Billy's ear whenever she pleased. When word got back to me that Lauren was bad-mouthing me all over town, my blood boiled for a second, but I didn't let it get the best of me. I knew I had to handle this the right way. I waited for the right moment to deal with Lauren directly, and that moment came sooner than I thought. I found Lauren at the market on a Sunday morning, filling her basket with groceries. She didn't see me at first, but I walked right up to her, steady and strong. "Lauren," I said. She looked up and rolled her eyes. "What do you want, Sophia?" "We need to talk. It's about the stories you've been spreading." She snorted loudly, a smirk spreading across her face. "Stories? I don't know what you're talking about." "The rumors, Lauren, about me. Teresa's bossy, Teresa's this and that. Cut it out." She laughed, tossing an apple up and down in her hand. "And what are you going to do if I don't? You think you can boss me around?" I kept my cool. "Listen, spreading lies isn't just mean, it's slander, and I won't stand for it." Lauren laughed again, louder this time. "You're going to sue me. Get real, Sophia. You aren't got the stomach for that. People's reputations are at stake." "I'm serious, Lauren. Keep it up, and yes, I will take legal action if I need to." The arrogance just poured off her as she leaned in close. "You're in way over your head, little Miss City Lawyer. Going to take me to court." "This isn't a joke, Lauren. I'm giving you a chance to stop this nonsense before it gets serious." She shoved her face closer to mine, a challenge plain in her expression. "Bring it on, Sophia. Do your worst." With that, she spun on her heel, almost knocking over a display of canned beans, and left me standing there. Her laughter echoed through the aisle long after she was gone. I walked back home slower than usual, thinking everything over. Later that day, when my husband came back, I told him what happened. He was in the middle of taking his boots off, and he froze, one boot off, the other still on. "You did what now?" he asked. I told Lauren off. I threatened her with legal action if she doesn't stop spreading rumors. His face went red, then white. "You couldn't just let it go. Why did you have to stir the pot, Sophia?" I straightened up. "Because it's not right, and I won't be walked over. Not by her, not by anyone." We were silent for a while, both lost in our thoughts. It was clear this was more than a little family squabble. It was a line drawn in the sand, and I had to stand my ground. He just stood there with that same lost puppy look that's becoming permanent on his face. I threw myself onto the couch, fuming. The gossip might calm down for now, but Lauren is the kind of weed that keeps sprouting up. No telling when she'll start yapping again. And Billy? God knows if he'll ever find the guts to stand up to them. Right now, I just need to cool off and figure out my next move in this messy game they're all too eager to play. The whole mess with Lauren had me weighing my options like a pros and cons list in my head. I signed up for a life with Billy, not a daily soap opera with his family. And with things going from bad to worse, the word divorce started rattling around in my brain like loose change in a dryer. Then, as if on cue, Mrs. Jerry, the town's self-appointed gossip queen and Lauren's godmother, called me up. "Sophia dear," she chirped like a bird that spotted a worm, "we're throwing a little party for Lauren's engagement. It's happening at Giuseppina's next week. We'd love to see you there." The tone of her voice was all fake niceness, the kind that practically screams, "I dare you to show up." After hanging up, I stared at the silent phone, thinking how this invite smelled like a setup. Billy was already on edge, and now this. I couldn't help but blurt out to him, "Guess who's got plans for us next week?" He was sitting at the kitchen table, his forehead creased like he was trying to iron out a thought. "Who's scheming now?" "Your sister's engagement party," I said. I say it straight out. We're invited, courtesy of Mrs. Jerry. Billy's face goes a shade paler, the crease deepening. "Oh hell." "Yeah, oh hell sounds about right. So what's the plan here, Billy? We going to roll over and play nice or what?" He's quiet for too long, and I'm not having it. "Come on, spit it out." Billy finally looks up, his eyes serious. "Sophia, it's family. I think we should go." I cross my arms, feeling the heat rise up my neck, and let Lauren have a field day. I'm not their punching bag. He throws his hands up, a bit too dramatically. What do you want me to say? That's my sister Sophia. I lean in, my hands flat on the table. And I'm your wife. Does that not count for much these days? The word divorce is right there on the tip of my tongue, but I bite it back hard. Billy runs his hand through his hair, making it stand up like he's just had an electric shock. Of course it counts. Look, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here. I'm a heartbeat away from losing my cool. Well, guess what, sweetheart, so am I. I married you, not your constant need to please your family at my expense. Billy stands up, walks over, and takes my hands. They felt rough, all work and worry. Sophia, I love you. I do, and I hate that it's come to this. Let's not go to the party. You and me, we're a team, right? It struck me then that this was the first time in a long while he picked me over them without flinching. It felt like finding an oasis in the middle of the desert. That night, the thought of divorce quietly tucked itself away. Not gone, but sleeping like a dog with one eye always open. But it was enough for me to catch my breath, to maybe believe that we could find some solid ground again. Giuseppe's was hopping when we showed up, walls throbbing with too loud laughter and clinking glasses. I spotted Mrs. Jerry right away, sitting queen bee style at the biggest table with that I rule the world look. There was Billy's sister Lauren, all grins like she won the lottery, and her guy Andrew, a deer in headlights type trying to smile. His folks were with them too, stiff and awkward like they wandered into the wrong movie theater. Mrs. Jerry zeroed in on me the second we stepped in. Sophia, she oozed, like I was a 6-year-old not playing nice. You'll be taking care of the bill tonight, right? To show you're one of us. I nearly spit out my drink. What? Why me? The table's all ears now, and the air's thick with that, oh, this is going to be good vibe. Mrs. Jerry stretches her smile. Tradition, sweetheart. The newest family member always shows their commitment. My jaw clamps shut so fast I'm surprised I don't chip a tooth. Commitment. That sounds a whole lot like a shakedown. Everyone's perked up like they're hearing a whistle. And there she goes, Mrs. Jerry puffing up like I slapped her. Excuse me, that's uncalled for. Billy leans in, his voice barely more than a whisper. Just do it, Sophia. It's not a big deal. A big deal, I whisper back, my voice turning to a snarl. No thanks, I aren't no one's piggy bank. He's hissing now, real quiet but clear. Pay the damn bill, Sophia, or we're through. I mean it. My laugh is as sharp as a snapped wire. You're not serious. He's all stone face and tight mouth. You think I'm playing. I stare him down. Divorce over this? He's all, family first, Sophia. I'm shaking my head. And where do I fit, huh? It's shout-out time, and even Andrew and his parents are watching, their faces screaming, what the hell's going on? I push back my chair and stand, letting them all hear me. No, I aren't doing this dance, I say, my voice like a hammer on steel. There's shock on their faces, some whispering, some wide-eyed. Billy's going red, white, red, like a stoplight losing its mind. Mrs. Jerry looks like she might choke. I walk out into the night. It's black and cool and smells like freedom. I hear the door slam behind me. My heart's racing, but it's Billy who threw the divorce word, not me. The bar was nothing special, just another hole in the wall with dim lights and the smell of old beer. I had barely settled with a glass of something strong when my phone rang. It was Billy, and for a moment I considered not answering, but I did. Sophia, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say divorce. Billy's voice was rushed and apologetic. Before I could even think of a response, Lauren's voice blasted through. You've ruined my engagement dinner. You selfish. The phone must have changed hands so fast my head spun. I could practically hear the venom in her voice. In the background, I heard Mrs. Jerry loud and clear. Why should I pay? He's your son. You pay the bill. I won't have my daughter marrying into a family that doesn't know how to treat people. The chaos from Giuseppe's was spilling through the phone like a bad sitcom without a laugh track. People were arguing, and it seemed like nobody was keen on picking up the tab. I pushed away from the bar, my anger giving me a clear, calm voice. "Lauren, chill out. Your mom's the one making a scene, not me." "Sophia, hang up," Billy said, his voice a faint whisper behind his sister's ranting. "No, she needs to," Lauren kept going, but I wasn't about to play this game. I ended the call. The screen showed a string of missed calls and texts that I swiped away. They were probably all about the same thing. Guilt and blame, the usual. I looked at the bartender. "Another one, please." He nodded, pouring another shot without a word. Silence settled around me, except for the low murmur from the regulars scattered around. I tried to collect my thoughts. My phone screen lit up again, showing Billy's name. The guy just didn't know when to quit. I flipped the phone face down, letting it go to voicemail. It was futile to talk when the whole crew was going off the rails back there. A few drinks later, the door to the bar creaked open, and in came a chill gust of evening air, but I didn't look up. It didn't matter who was coming and going. I thought about what had just happened and what it all meant. Here I was, sitting in a bar because my in-laws decided I was the bank, and instead of understanding, my supposed partner turned it into an ultimatum. I finally picked up my phone and typed out a text. "Billy, we're done. Lauren can think what she wants, and your mom can deal with her own damn bills. I won't be part of this circus anymore." Just as I hit send, the phone rang again. This time, I shut it off. I was tired of the arguing, the demands, and above all, tired of feeling like I was alone in a partnership that was supposed to have my back. When the room finally stopped spinning and my head felt a little clearer, I knew what had to happen next. It was time to start looking forward, even if I had to do it on my own. No more games, no more being the scapegoat for a family that couldn't see past their own drama. I walked out of the bar, leaving the noise and the night behind. The air was getting colder, and the city lights were starting to blur into the coming darkness. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was mine to take. What a mess that last evening was. The whole thing at the restaurant blew up bigger than anyone thought. The groom had had it up to here with the drama and ditched the engagement right then and there. You should have seen Lauren's face when he dropped that bomb. I can't believe it. No one saw it coming, least of all her. Then the mother-in-law lost it, screaming like a banshee. She was causing such a scene that the groom's family looked ready to call 911. She was yelling about disrespect and no consideration. It was pure chaos, like one of those trashy daytime shows where chairs start flying. Meanwhile, I was done. I filed for divorce and cut off all contact. I ignored Billy's calls and deleted his messages. The last I heard, he, his sister, and my former mother-in-law from hell are all holed up in the same house, probably driving each other crazy. As for me, it felt like I finally stopped holding my breath after years underwater. Life's simpler now, but that evening is still the talk whenever I bump into people from the old circle. It gets old, you know. So, here's the update for anyone who still cares. I'm living my best, most peaceful life. I'm sitting in my usual spot at the cafe down the street from my place, the one where the coffee is strong and no one asks too many questions. The barista gives me a nod. "The usual?" he asks, like he's asking if the sky is up. "Yep," I say. That's what my days are like now, no fluff or meddling in laws. Work's a breeze when it's just that work. Free time is mine to enjoy without guilt trips or obligations. I curl up on my couch, the one piece of furniture that's followed me through all the moves. The springs are shot to hell, but it fits my back just right. I flip on the TV, watching some crime show where they catch the bad guys by minute 30. The peace is what gets me, not eerie or lonely, just peace. Breathe in, breathe out. No more walking on eggshells or cleaning up family feuds. This is living. When I hit the pillow each night, it's with a sense of accomplishment. No pat on the back needed. I know my worth, and finally, I'm living like it. I'm eating my lunch when the phone dings a message from a number I don't know. Probably Billy using someone else's phone to reach out. I delete it without reading. Not today, Satan. Not ever. They used to say, "You'll regret this," but here I am, not a single regret in sight. The day drags out cozy and fine, ending with a glass of something smooth and a book I've been meaning to read. The heroine's tough but fair, reminds me of someone I know. I'll never forget the conversation I had with my father when I told him I was engaged. He pulled me aside, his expression serious, and said, "Lauren, are you really sure about marrying this man, Larry? I know you love him, but I don't think he's the right person for you." Confused, I asked, "Why are you saying this, Dad? He loves me and respects me. I don't care that he doesn't have as much money as we do." My father sighed, his voice soft but firm. "Lauren, you know I built my wealth from the ground up. I would never look down on someone just because they're not from the same financial background. But there's something about Larry that worries me. He's a bit of a shady character, and his mother is no better." I was taken aback. "What do you mean, Dad? I don't understand." He hesitated, then said, "Maybe it's just a father's instinct, but I don't believe this man truly loves you. Yes, he's affectionate, but I've heard him talk about how rich you are. I overheard him bragging to his friends, saying he had bagged the rich brat. And Linda, she just laughed and agreed with him." I felt a pang in my heart, trying to defend Larry. "You must be mistaken, Dad. Larry would never say those things about me. And Linda cares about me too. She would definitely scold him if he ever joked like that." But deep down, I wondered if there was some truth in my father's words. Sometimes I wish I had listened to him. At the time, I was just a naive girl in love, desperate to hold on to something after losing my mother 3 years before. My dad was ill, and I knew he didn't have much time left. I clung to Larry and Linda because they gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. My father had built a comfortable life for us through hard work and smart investments. I had a decent job and earned a moderate salary, so overall, we were doing well. Larry and Linda, on the other hand, didn't have as much. Larry made more money than I did, but he came from a modest background. His job didn't bring in the kind of money that could make someone rich, and I could tell that bothered him. He and Linda liked fancy and expensive things, and Larry often complained about not having enough money to buy them. I was always eager to help them out with the little allowance my father gave me. I even let Larry and Linda move into my house after we got married, but instead of being grateful, they seemed dissatisfied. They would say things like, "It's such a shame you live in a small house. Your dad lives in a mansion, so why did you buy such a tiny townhouse?" Looking back, I realize how much I overlooked because I wanted so badly to make things work. I ignored the little red flags and convinced myself that everything would be okay. But in the end, I wish I had trusted my father's instincts. I don't make a lot of money. Larry's dad lives in a mansion because he's wealthy, but I'm just a regular office worker with a modest salary. Buying this house was a real challenge for me, and I was only able to manage it because my dad helped with the down payment. Larry, however, wasn't impressed. He said, "Well, if your dad helped you out, he should have gotten you a better place. I'm sure your mom left him something to give you when you got older." I tried to explain, "I'm not entitled to anything, Linda. Whatever my mom left behind is my dad's now. She passed away suddenly, and there was no will. Honestly, I don't mind if I don't get anything. I'm content with the way things are." Linda scoffed, "That's a ridiculous thing to say, Lauren. I would have loved to inherit a lot of money. You know what? Your dad should trade houses with us. He lives alone, so he doesn't need all that space anyway, right, Larry?" Larry nodded in agreement, adding, "Yeah, Lauren, you should ask him." I felt a surge of protectiveness and responded firmly, "Absolutely not. That house belongs to my dad, and he deserves to live comfortably as long as he's alive." Linda then remarked, Well, he won't be alive for long now that he's sick. We could wait and compromise for a few years and see what happens. Ultimately, everything will be yours after your dad passes. You'll have plenty of money to buy a big house and more. The way Linda and Larry were already making plans to spend my inheritance was deeply unsettling. It didn't help that they frequently urged me to ask my dad for more money. We weren't struggling financially. Larry and Linda just wanted the luxurious lifestyle they imagined, even though it wasn't within our reach. Honestly, I was growing tired of their behavior. However, the real drama unfolded after my father passed away. His battle with cancer ended sooner than I had expected, leaving me devastated. I was heartbroken, but Larry and Linda offered little support. Instead, they were more concerned about the date of the will reading and showed no interest in helping with the funeral arrangements. To make matters worse, they even refused to attend the funeral, saying that my dad was no one to them. At that moment, I was overwhelmed with grief and anger. My dad's warnings kept echoing in my mind, and I couldn't help but feel suspicious of Larry and Linda. I began to doubt their intentions, wondering if they had ever truly cared about me or if they were only interested in what they could gain. I was starting to worry that Larry and Linda were only interested in my inheritance. When it came time for the reading of the will, they weren't allowed to be present, and they were furious. Larry snapped, "Why on earth aren't we allowed to be there? This is absurd. Brian was my father-in-law." Linda chimed in, equally outraged, "Yes, this is ridiculous. We're family, and we have every right to know what Brian left behind. At the very least, my son should be allowed to be there." I tried to keep calm and explained, "Your son isn't mentioned in the will, Linda, so he doesn't have the right to be there. Why are you two so fixated on the inheritance? You didn't even bother to come to the funeral." It was ironic how suddenly my dad mattered to them when it came to the possibility of getting some money. I was really annoyed with both Linda and Larry, but what made things worse was how relentless they were. As soon as I got back from the will reading, they pounced on me, eager for details. They weren't allowed to see the will themselves, and that only made them more persistent. I was struggling with the grief of losing my father, but instead of offering any words of comfort, they were only interested in one thing. Linda asked bluntly, "So, we've been wondering for a while now. How much inheritance did you get from your parents? You must have received a lot of money. Tell us how much." I looked at them and said, "Unfortunately, my parents didn't leave me any money, so I didn't receive anything." Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? You didn't get any money, but your parents were rich? They should have left you something. I don't believe you didn't get any money. You're lying to us. There's no way your parents didn't leave you a single penny." Larry joined in, pressing me, "No money at all. The will didn't even mention you getting any kind of money. You can't be serious." I sighed and tried to stay patient. "No, Larry, there was no money in my inheritance. The lawyer told me that. You can even check my bank balance in a few days and see for yourself." "But what about all their wealth?" Linda asked, her voice edged with frustration. "You're their only child. Who's going to get everything they had?" I shook my head and said, "I don't know about that, Linda. The lawyer just told me I didn't get any money, and honestly, that's okay with me. It was my parents' money, and it's up to them who they chose to leave it to." Linda looked furious and blurted out, "That's ridiculous. You need to fight for that money. It should be yours." "There is no money, Larry," I repeated firmly. They didn't have much left in the end, and whatever was left, they gave to charity. They had been planning this for a while. Larry and Linda looked completely taken aback, anger simmering just below the surface. I couldn't understand why they were so upset. I almost gave in and told them everything, but something held me back. There was a growing doubt in my mind that my husband and mother-in-law were up to something that wasn't in my best interest. I decided to wait and see how they would react, but they didn't let up. Larry and Linda kept pressuring me for more information, as if they didn't believe what I had told them. The more they pushed, the more uneasy I felt, sensing that there was more to their behavior than just disappointment over the inheritance. I decided enough was enough. I told them firmly that I didn't get any money, and even offered to show them my bank account in a few days. A month passed and nothing showed up. During this time, Larry became more distant and stopped being affectionate. He was always checking my account and constantly hounding me for information about my inheritance. It became clear where this was heading. Finally, one day, I decided to put an end to it. I showed them my bank statements and said, "See, I told you that I didn't receive anything. I'm not hiding any secret inheritance money from you. Do you believe me now?" Larry looked at the statements and said, "Wow, our years of hard work just went down the drain then. So her parents weren't rich, and she didn't even get $3,500 in the will. This is ridiculous. I can't believe this." Linda echoed his sentiment. "I can't believe this either, Larry. I stayed in this marriage for nothing. I married Lauren for nothing. It was all a waste of time." Feeling hurt and confused, I asked, "What the hell does that mean, Larry? Why are you talking like this?" Linda answered for him. "Why do you think he's saying these things, Lauren? Who the hell would marry you without thinking about the money? My son simply married you so that we could rely on your inheritance. Now I see that you didn't even get a penny. I can't believe I wasted 3 freaking years on a useless girl like you. I could have done so much better." I was stunned to hear them speak that way about me. I finally realized that Larry married me for money. My parents were right about him, and his mom, they were gold diggers. I was so done with my husband and mother-in-law. I was breaking inside, but what they said next turned me to stone. Linda looked at Larry solemnly and said, "What's done is done, Larry. But now it's time for you to divorce Lauren. There is no reason for you to stay with her anymore. You will have time to find a new rich wife. This time, we will make sure she actually has some money to her name." I was in disbelief. "Are you freaking kidding me, Linda? You're asking Larry to divorce me over money. Larry, are you going to listen to her?" Larry didn't hesitate. "Of course, I would listen to her, Lauren. I married you so that my mom and I could have a comfortable life. We grew up poor, and I didn't even go to college. I had no way of earning a lot of money." I was horrified. "So you pretended to love me and tricked me into marrying you. You thought my parents would give me lots of money." Larry nodded, and I felt my heart shatter. "Yes, Lauren. I thought your parents would leave you a lot of money, but now I see that they didn't. It was all for nothing." With those words, everything became clear. My parents were right all along. Larry and Linda were only interested in my inheritance, and now that it was gone, they had no use for me. I knew I had to leave them and start a new life, free from their greed and deception. I was willing to share everything with Larry, believing that our marriage was built on love and trust. But when he spoke, I realized how wrong I was. "Yes, that's what I thought too," he said coldly. "It was the only way I could give my mom the life she always wanted. But now I see that my efforts were pointless. Mom's right, I need to divorce you and keep looking." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. The casual, almost indifferent way he talked about ending our marriage made me question my own sanity. How could he be so detached, so unfeeling? Linda and Larry continued to voice their frustration, complaining about the marriage and about me, but I stopped listening. I was too overwhelmed, too lost in my thoughts, trying to process what they had just said. Their complete lack of emotion and Larry's sudden change in behavior were both heartbreaking and infuriating. At first, I felt a wave of anger rise up inside me. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to let out all the pain and frustration that had been building up. But instead, I took a deep breath and remained calm. "Okay then, Larry," I said quietly. "If a divorce is what you want, you'll get it. I've never been one to refuse your demands, so I might as well give in to this one as a last favor." Linda, sensing an opportunity, quickly added, "So you'll agree to a mutual divorce?" It'll save us both a lot of money. And don't even think about trying to get alimony from my son. We'll fight you every step of the way. It's best if you just agree to this." I nodded, realizing that I didn't have much choice. "You're right, I don't have a lot of money right now. So I've decided on something. I'll agree to a mutual divorce, but only if you sign a clause stating that we won't share any of our assets. We'll each walk away with what we have, and nothing more." Larry agreed without hesitation. "That's not a problem at all. You don't have much, and neither do I at the moment. If you can forego alimony, I'll sign the divorce papers and won't claim anything from you." We discussed the details of the divorce, making sure we were on the same page. I could see the relief on their faces. They were both happy that I wasn't making a fuss. I guess they didn't expect me to be so calm about it. But the truth was, ever since that day, I had been crying on my way to and from work. I would sit in the parking lot of my office, crying for an hour before and after work, trying to pull myself together. Larry never noticed my puffy eyes, never asked why I was leaving early for work or coming home late. Linda didn't even bother looking at me after she found out I had no money. Their behavior only made me more determined to get out of the marriage as soon as possible. I knew I had to stay strong and move on with my life. Even though it hurt deeply, I was ready to close this chapter and start anew. The way they treated me, the way they were more interested in money than in our relationship, made me realize that I deserved better. I deserved to be with someone who loved me for who I am, not for what I could offer them financially. In the end, I agreed to the mutual divorce, and I made sure that we each kept our own assets. It was a painful process, but I knew it was the right decision. I had to let go of the life I thought I had and focus on building a new one, free from the greed and deception that had poisoned my marriage. I decided that I needed some space from Larry and Linda, so I had them move out of my house and into a rented place nearby. They settled in quickly, and while we waited for the divorce to be finalized, Larry kept his word and didn't demand a share of my house. I also didn't ask for any alimony. In his eyes, it was a fair deal, but I had no idea how much I had underestimated the situation. The truth of it all came to light on the day our divorce was finalized. I went over to their new place to drop off my wedding and engagement rings. When I handed them over, I said, "Larry, I just wanted to return these to you. This marriage only brought bad times into my life, and I don't want to keep any reminders of it." Larry looked at me surprised. "Are you sure you want to return them? You might need the money someday." Linda, never one to miss a chance to be snide, added, "It's so funny how you're giving them back. You must have laughed at our poverty before, but look where you are now. My son is being generous, giving you the rings back. You might need to sell them when your stupid job doesn't pay enough. We don't want the rings anyway, they're cheap ones." I kept my composure and replied, "What would I need to sell the rings for, Linda? I'm not embarrassed. You don't need to worry about my financial situation." Linda smirked and said, "Oh, we already know. Your parents didn't leave you anything, probably because they lost everything due to bad financial decisions, leaving their daughter with nothing." At that point, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Linda looked puzzled, and so did Larry. I could see that Larry was annoyed by his mother's behavior and also surprised by my laughter. Linda snapped, "Why the hell are you laughing? Did I say something funny?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "It's hilarious that you think I'm destitute, Linda. It's also funny that you believe my parents lost all their fortune." Linda, clearly offended, retorted, "Well, of course you're destitute. Your parents didn't even leave you a penny. They must have messed up and ruined your life by not leaving you an inheritance." I smiled and said calmly, "I never said I didn't receive an inheritance, Linda. I simply told you that I didn't get any money. My parents actually left me plenty of inheritance." Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. "What do you mean you have an inheritance? I'm so confused." I continued, "My parents could see through you and Larry for what you are, little gold diggers. So they made a secret clause in their will. It stated that I wouldn't receive any monetary inheritance right away. Instead, I was given something much more valuable. Larry, now clearly agitated, asked, "What are you talking about? What did they leave you?" I looked at them both and said, "My parents left me this entire neighborhood as my inheritance." Linda and Larry were stunned. Linda stammered, "What? You own this neighborhood now? How is that possible?" "We would have known about your inheritance if that were true. We even signed the lease with an estate manager who didn't tell us the name of the owner." I explained, "My parents wanted me to wait for a year before I could take full control of the properties, so everything was kept quiet. But now I own this entire neighborhood, including the place you're living in." Linda and Larry were left speechless. The realization that they had been living in a place I owned, after all their scheming, was too much for them to handle. The tables had turned completely, and they were finally exposed for who they truly were. I turned to leave, feeling a sense of closure and satisfaction. I had seen through their greed and managed to come out stronger on the other side. Now I was ready to move on and build a new life, free from their manipulation and lies. I got my inheritance, and my parents wanted me to test if you were with me for love or money. Well, you both failed the test, so now you won't get anything from me. The estate manager was put in charge by my parents to take care of the property before I inherited it. They were very smart, you know. Larry scoffed, "That's impossible. I don't believe anything you're saying. You're just embarrassed because you don't have any money left." I replied, "Oh really, Larry? Is that what you and your mother think? Why don't you call your landlord and ask him yourself?" Linda and Larry quickly called their landlord to check what I had said. Since their landlord was actually the estate manager, he told them everything. When they hung up, they looked shocked and panicked. "You lied to us," Linda stammered. "You tricked us into thinking you didn't have anything, but you own the entire housing society now. How dare you trick us like this? You wanted to keep all your wealth to yourself, so you made Larry divorce you and sign papers saying he wouldn't take anything from you." I couldn't help but laugh at their nerve. It was finally hitting them how badly they had messed up, and now it was time for some well-deserved karma. I said, "It's funny you're accusing me of being dishonest. Larry, you tricked me into marrying you by pretending you loved me. And Linda, you helped him with this plan and even told him to divorce me. If anyone here was scamming, it was the two of you. As for my inheritance, you asked how much money I got, and I answered truthfully. This was all a misunderstanding on your part." Linda tried to reason with me. "What's done is in the past. Why don't we try again? We did spend 5 years together, and it would be a shame to throw it all away." I shook my head and said, "So now you want me back in your life? Funny how you were so eager to start fresh with a new girl. I hear you're already seeing someone rich. Don't worry, I'll let her know what a snake you are, Larry." Larry and Linda started begging me not to ruin his new relationship. Larry pleaded, saying that if I wasn't willing to give him another chance, I shouldn't mess up his future. I told him to get lost and also informed them that I would kick them out once the property was officially mine. They panicked and started begging even more. In the weeks that followed, Linda and Larry kept coming to my house, pleading for forgiveness. They already had an eviction on their record, so it was unlikely anyone else would rent to them. The only reason they were still staying on my property was because I had asked the estate manager to allow it. I also contacted Larry's new girlfriend and told her everything. She was horrified by what Larry and Linda had done and broke up with him immediately. She even showed me the text messages as proof. After this mess, Larry and Linda came over, yelling at me and calling me names. I quickly called the police and had them removed from my property. Once the property was officially in my name, I kicked them out very quickly. They didn't expect me to follow through with my threat. When they showed up again, I called the police, who gave them a stern warning. I also filed for a restraining order. It turned out that the whole town knew about what had happened. Larry and Linda were shunned by their friends and had to leave the city to start over somewhere else. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my new wealth and finally free from those gold-digging leeches. Right after I bought a house with a garden, my husband Justin and his mom, Linda, both grinning, told me my in-laws would be moving in with us. They said if I didn't like it, Justin would divorce me. If Linda came, her mean daughter would surely follow. They knew I hated this, but did it anyway. The daily harassment would continue even in the new house. I shuddered at the thought and said, "No, I don't want to live with you." Linda looked at me, raising her eyebrows. She pulled out divorce papers, already signed by Justin. She only cared about getting the house. Their plan had worked, which was terrifying. I struggled to hold back my laughter. Seeing me tremble with my head down, Linda looked victorious. I quietly signed the divorce papers, packed my things, and left the house I dreaded. On moving day, my ex-mother-in-law bombarded me with calls. "Have you realized yet?" she demanded, asking to meet and talk. That was exactly what I wanted. I would meet her and end this myself. I prepared for the final confrontation and headed to face them. My name is Julie. I work at an advertising agency. My husband Larry was introduced to me by Eric, a manager at a newspaper company. I couldn't refuse Eric's offer because I was in a weak position. I was 31 at the time, and after 5 months of dating, I married Larry due to his persistence. I ended up regretting this decision at such an important moment. I think my ex-mother-in-law, Olivia, planned to deceive me from the start. She seemed gentle and kind, but her attitude changed as soon as I married Larry. She dropped the mask of a reasonable older woman and showed her true colors as a cruel mother-in-law. "Hey Julie, what are you doing? I told you to weed the garden after cleaning the dishes." Not a day passed without her shrill voice echoing through the house. I felt exhausted every day. I could barely manage a sigh in response. After the wedding, I agreed to live with my in-laws because Larry insisted. His father had passed away, and Olivia, his mom, had been dealing with a leg injury for years. Larry begged me, saying he couldn't leave his aging mother alone in the old house. But when I got there, I saw Olivia walking around just fine. She said that teaching a daughter-in-law was a mother-in-law's duty and treated me harshly every day. Larry was no help either. Whenever I suggested living separately, he made excuses and avoided the issue. He always did whatever she wanted and never stood up for me when she scolded me. "Yeah, my mom has quite a temper, huh?" he would say. "Stop grinning and help me. This is really hard for me." After getting married, I began to feel intense anxiety and depression. I found myself crying unexpectedly or feeling sick for no reason. After seeing a doctor, I was diagnosed with an adjustment disorder. The thought that every day spent at my in-laws was affecting me badly was truly unpleasant. Despite my feelings, Olivia continued to make unreasonable demands. "Don't be lazy just because it's your day off. Have you finished cleaning the room? You haven't gone shopping yet, have you? Make sure to check the discount stores before you go. Please, Olivia, don't shout at me. I have a headache. I'll do the cleaning and shopping later," I pleaded. "Don't give me that. When you're told to do something, you do it immediately. You're the daughter-in-law, aren't you?" "A daughter-in-law is not a maid," I wanted to retort. Her demands often involved the house itself, cleaning the gutters, replacing the wallpaper, fixing the splinters in the pillars. The in-laws' house was very old and falling apart. It creaked whenever the wind blew. Each time, she would urge Larry to get a new house. "This place is a rental, you know. We're renting it cheaply from an acquaintance. Just once, I want to live freely in our own home. Don't you think so, Larry?" "I do, but we can't afford it on my salary. A house of our own is just a dream," Larry replied. Olivia grew frustrated with her useless son and took out her frustration on me. "Cook, clean, weed the garden, take me to the hospital." She didn't care that I was exhausted from working full-time. It was no wonder I developed an adjustment disorder. I couldn't help but think that every day. 5 months after moving in with my in-laws, a woman who made my miserable life even worse arrived. Larry's sister Kelly came back after her divorce, bringing her child with her. She said her ex kicked her out, saying he didn't want to see her face anymore. Well, it's my fault really, she admitted. I left my kid alone and slept with my husband's boss. What kind of morals does this woman have? When Kelly saw my shocked face, she smiled a little. Kelly, who looked just like Olivia, acted just like her too. She refused to do any housework and made me clean her room as well. It's only fair, right? I'm raising a child. You wouldn't understand since you haven't given birth, but it's harder than it looks. So thanks in advance for your help, Julie. Kelly didn't work. She lazed around all day. Her care for her child was half-hearted at best. She would lie on the sofa doing nothing. On weekends, her behavior was especially bad. She'd leave her young daughter with me and go to the arcade. Kelly had some bad friends from her wild days, and sometimes started drinking with them in the afternoon. I wish she would at least help with some of the housework, but Kelly did absolutely nothing. She was the type of woman who would do anything to get money for fun. One day, Kelly handed me a drawstring bag. When I looked inside, I saw my dad's cufflinks, a ring, and some vintage lighters. What do you expect me to do with these? I asked. Figure it out. Sell them and make sure you get a good price, okay? Kelly said casually. These were my late father's belongings, meant to be keepsakes, yet Kelly told me to sell them without a second thought. I felt a wave of sadness, especially since she would likely use the money for the arcade. Unable to bring myself to do it, I explained the situation and handed the bag over to Larry. I don't know what he did with his father's keepsakes, and frankly, I don't want to know. When Kelly first returned, many things happened. My belongings frequently went missing after she arrived. Around that time, I also discovered that Larry was probably having an affair. A friend who worked at a different advertising agency saw him in town on a weekend. Larry was walking arm in arm with a flashy young woman. I was furious when I heard the story. I'm working hard from morning till night, even on weekends, and you're out having fun with a young woman. Unbelievable. This is cheating, right? Who is she? Tell me the truth. It's not cheating. She's just a worker from a massage parlor, Larry replied. And how is that any better? You shouldn't be going to such places when you're married, I shouted. Kelly laughed hysterically at our argument. Olivia seemed annoyed but didn't strongly scold Larry. According to Olivia's logic, if a husband goes to such places, it's because the wife isn't devoted enough. Getting upset over something like that is embarrassing. The problem is you. If you were more devoted to Larry, this wouldn't happen, Olivia said. I don't agree, Olivia. Isn't that a bit unreasonable? I said. This is the norm in this house. Besides, going to places like that or having an affair shows a man's strength. A wife should forgive such things with a big heart, you know. What was normal for them was crazy to me. Forgive visits to those places and affairs? There was no way I could do that. My frustration only grew, and I couldn't just stand by any longer. Determined to change this unpleasant situation, I decided to take action. Olivia and Kelly stayed the same day after day, treating me like a servant. They lounged around on the sofa or floor, raising their voices when they were hungry. Hey, why isn't lunch ready yet? It's already noon. Stop dragging your feet, Julie. You're so slow, it's annoying. Then why don't you make it yourselves? I've been cleaning the garden, airing out the carpets, and shopping with no time to rest, I replied. Don't talk back. Know your place as the daughter-in-law, they snapped. I wasn't even allowed to voice my opinion. I was utterly fed up. I wanted a divorce immediately, but if it were that easy, I wouldn't have been struggling. Larry was introduced to me by Eric, a manager at a newspaper company. I owed a lot to my boss, Richard, who also asked me not to do anything that would embarrass him. Olivia knew this and often used it against me. I was completely stuck between a rock and a hard place. For a while, all I could do was endure. Then, one day, Larry's affair became undeniable. That friend from the other agency got solid proof. The first stage of my plan was complete. I needed to figure out my next move. About a month later, I think it was, Kelly spread out a housing catalog on the dinner table after dinner. From every angle, it was clear that these were items I had put in my bag. Look at this. Julie was planning to buy a house. Wait, did you rummage through my bag? Why? Why would you do that? I demanded. Just be quiet. Oh, it's a nice house, a bit in the countryside, but still. Hey Julie, you should have discussed something like this with me, Kelly said. I had my eye on a house with a garden. As Olivia said, it was in the countryside but looked quite good. I had already visited the place several times and met with the real estate agent. When I admitted this, the three of them became very interested. What? How far along are you in the process? Are you going to buy it? It's cheap and spacious. Not bad at all, Olivia said. Larry added, "Amen, got to be bold. Oh, well, a house with a garden, huh? That's a big decision if you decide to become the head of your own household. I'll support you, and I'll even help a little financially. Wouldn't you like to leave here and live with Julie in your own place?" Olivia said, pretending to be supportive. She was already encouraging Larry before I could say anything. How fake. She had no intention of letting me go easily. When I asked whose name the house would be under, Larry frowned. I'm the head of the household. It will be in my name, of course. Then can I go ahead with the purchase? We'll buy this house, and the two of us will move out, right? I asked. All right, I've decided. I'll buy the house. Go ahead and move forward with the arrangements, Larry finally said firmly. Olivia and Kelly both praised Larry for his decision, but I noticed them exchanging a knowing smile. A few days later, just after buying the house with a garden in the countryside as planned, Larry and Olivia, both grinning, made an announcement. They're moving in too, Larry said. What? But you said we live there alone, I exclaimed. After thinking it over, we decided to live together. You're not going to say no, are you? If you refuse, I'll make Larry divorce you. I wonder what your boss Richard would think of that, Olivia said. There it was, a cowardly move. If Olivia came, Kelly would surely follow. I shuddered at the thought of daily harassment continuing even in the new house. No way, I absolutely refuse. I have no intention of living there with you, I said firmly. You don't seem to understand your position, Olivia said, her eyebrows shooting up in anger, her face red, veins bulging at her temples. She pulled out divorce papers from somewhere, and Larry's part was already signed. Her face showed she didn't care about anything as long as she got the house. If you're really going to refuse, then sign here, she said. All right, I will. I'll sign. Let's get divorced. I've had enough, I replied. What? Hey, Julie, are you sure about this? Larry asked. Leave her. A useless woman like this is just going to make you angry. You're young. You'll find a new wife soon enough, Olivia said harshly. I quietly signed the divorce papers. Olivia looked triumphant, but she had no idea how I felt. My plan had worked perfectly, which was terrifying. I struggled to hold back my laughter. A few days after I moved into my new apartment, I started getting a lot of calls from Olivia. Checking my calendar, I realized today was their moving day. She must have figured it out. The phone kept ringing nonstop, typical Olivia. Ignoring the calls didn't help, they kept coming. Finally, I answered due to her persistence. Olivia didn't even say hello, she just started yelling. Julie, how could you do this? What kind of house did you make us buy? Hello, Olivia. Calm down. What are you talking about? I don't understand, I replied. Don't play dumb. This house, you knew it was defective when you bought it, didn't you? Didn't you? She screamed. That's right, the house I chose had problems. The ground was unstable, causing the land to sink. Even a new house could have doors and windows that wouldn't close properly after a few years. There were old mining tunnels nearby that caused these issues. The locals knew about this and built their houses on stable land. Only clueless newcomers fell into this trap. I used this problem-ridden house to trick those three. It was tough to find a reasonably priced defective house, even with the help of a real estate agent. I'd also made sure Kelly would steal the real estate catalog from my bag. I had deliberately left my bag in an easy-to-steal place. They fell right into the trap and moved in. It was hard to keep from laughing when I signed the divorce papers. I wanted to tell them everything, but I couldn't. I played dumb. A defective house? That can't be right. There must be some mistake, I said, feigning innocence. What is with that attitude? So fake, just come over here, Olivia demanded. No, honestly, I don't ever want to see you again, I replied firmly. What? What did you say? She yelled. There was no way I wanted to see that unreasonable family again. I told her I wouldn't meet them even if they paid me. Then Larry took over after she clicked her tongue. Julie, please think about our situation a little, Larry said. I could say the same to you, Larry. Did you ever think about my feelings? No, you didn't. I was always isolated, I retorted. I'm sorry. I'll apologize. Just tell me where you moved to, he pleaded. Why would I tell you that? If you showed up, I'd have to move again. I want to cut all ties with you, I said. The conversation went nowhere. Eventually, Olivia and the others started making even more outrageous claims. They said the divorce was invalid and that we were still family. I had 2 colleagues sign as witnesses and submitted the divorce papers to the city hall. They are valid, and there's no way it's invalid. How unreasonable can they be? Anyway, they kept insisting, just meet with us once, Julie. We need to settle this properly. Olivia and Larry were determined to meet and talk. I knew they would keep calling if I kept refusing. I had no choice but to meet them to put an end to it myself. Fine, I'll meet with you once, I said. Thank you, I owe you one, Larry replied. But I'll choose the time and place, okay? I couldn't risk being ambushed or followed. I needed to stay in control to ensure my safety. After making careful plans, I arranged to meet the 3 of them at a cafe. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes late. Olivia and Kelly were already furious from waiting. Larry had a strained smile on his face. As expected, they were predictable. How dare you keep your elders waiting? It's so disrespectful, Olivia shouted. I don't want to hear about respect from you. So what do you want? I replied. What's with that attitude? It's infuriating. We're stuck with a defective house because of you. Take responsibility, Kelly chimed in. I told you, I don't know anything about that. You decided to move in on your own, didn't you? I responded. Olivia faltered, unable to deny that she and Kelly had willingly moved into the defective house. Their previous home was being renovated, so the only place they had to live was the defective house. If you're done, I have something to say. Olivia, I will be suing you for damages. Prepare yourself, I said. What? Damages? Suing? Why? What did I ever do to you? Tell me clearly, Olivia demanded. You mentally tormented me to the point of developing an adjustment disorder, I said, showing them a copy of my medical diagnosis. The 3 of them stared at it intently. Olivia's eyes widened. She probably never imagined I had been seeing a psychiatrist. You never thought about how much your words hurt others, did you? It was very painful for me. I felt nauseous and cried a lot. It was really tough, I continued. That's because you're weak. You were a lousy daughter-in-law and deserved it. Isn't that right? Olivia retorted. Calling me a lousy daughter-in-law repeatedly is slander. Slander is punishable by up to a year in prison or a fine of up to $5,000, I said firmly. What? That's ridiculous, Olivia exclaimed. What's ridiculous? I countered. Olivia didn't understand the seriousness of her actions. She had no idea how harmful her behavior was or how much her verbal abuse had hurt me. You also did other things that are punishable by law. You threatened me multiple times, saying you'd tell Richard about the divorce. That's extortion, I added. Wait, isn't that a bit exaggerated? Larry interjected. It's not exaggerated at all. By the way, extortion carries a penalty of up to 3 years in prison or a fine of up to $5,000, I replied. I won't back down on this, I said firmly. All right, wait a minute. Kelly stepped in, her eyes sharper than usual. She had the look of someone who wouldn't be intimidated by threats. What is this? Scaring my mom by taking advantage of her ignorance? Do you have any proof of these so-called slanders and threats? Yes, I do. I've been recording everything, I replied. What? Recording? Kelly's eyes widened. Yes, I've been recording with my phone's voice memo the entire time I lived at my ex-in-law's house. I have plenty of audio recordings, including data of Olivia's abusive language. Submitting this as evidence would confirm the charges of slander and threats. Did you really think I'd just take it? It's not just Olivia. Kelly, you're also guilty. You'll be held accountable too. What? Why me? What did I do? Kelly's voice rose in panic. Think about it. Haven't you committed any crimes, or are you saying you haven't caused me any trouble? Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. Kelly insisted she was innocent. I showed her the screen on my phone. Kelly's face turned pale. It showed her rummaging through my bag, nervously glancing around while searching the contents. What's that? How did you record this? Because my belongings frequently went missing after you arrived. Makeup, accessories, clothes, bags. I set up a hidden camera. This is awful. How could you do that? You're just a daughter-in-law. Unbelievable. Who's the one overstepping boundary here? Let me inform you about the penalty for theft: up to 12 years in prison or a fine of up to $5,000. I'll be contacting the police, I said firmly. Kelly's mouth opened and closed. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She looked completely helpless. I had kept track of all my missing items. Knowing the exact extent of the damages would make it easier for the police and lawyers to act. If I was going to do this, I would do it thoroughly. I was determined not to let these three off the hook. Finally, it was Larry's turn. He shrank back under my glare. If there was anyone I couldn't forgive the most, it was him. I believed a marriage was about mutual support, but Larry, you saw things differently, didn't you? From start to finish, you were always my enemy, weren't you? Enemy? No, I never meant that. Not at all. Please believe me. Even today, I was trying to mediate as much as possible, Larry pleaded. Sure, enough with the lies. I don't need your mediation, I said coldly. Larry was a cowardly man. He always sided with the stronger party. He had always been with Olivia and Kelly. Even now, he was trying to placate me to save himself. If he had been a slightly better man, maybe, but it was too late now. I would have stayed married if he had just said, "Let's move away and live just the two of us." I might have done that. The name of your affair partner? I believe it's Nickel. What? How did you know? Larry stammered. I had a friend investigate. She's good at that. I even have pictures of you and Nickel entering a hotel together. Look, here they are, I said, showing the photos. No, don't show them. Don't show them. Larry tried to stop me from showing the screen. He didn't want his mother and sister to see his affair. But why should it matter? Their morals were already broken. They were all like-minded. I put my phone and the copy of the diagnosis back in my bag. I had shown all the evidence I needed. Olivia, Larry, and Kelly looked defeated and drained of energy. If they did anything wrong, they'd be reported to the police. They seemed scared, but I was fully intending to consult the police regardless of their actions. I believe the police will come by eventually. Don't try to run. It will only make things worse. And make sure you don't follow me. Understood, I warned. Julie, don't be so cold. We were married until recently, remember? Larry pleaded. Yes, and honestly, I think marrying you was a huge mistake. I feel so relieved we're not a couple anymore. If you follow me, I'll press charges. So don't wait outside my office or contact me unless it's absolutely necessary, I said firmly. I made a few simple agreements with the three of them and left the cafe. Even after I left, they sat there looking dejected. You can't stop people from talking. The news of Larry's divorce quickly spread at his company. The reasons his infidelity and mistreatment of me spread along with it. As a result, Larry faced cold treatment at work. The person who introduced us was Eric from the affiliated newspaper company. Naturally, Larry lost his trust and was viewed harshly. Unable to endure the hostile environment, Larry eventually quit. He struggled to find new employment, and his relationships with his mother and sister became strained. About a year after our divorce, Larry reappeared in front of me. He called out to me as I was leaving work, and I turned to see a shabby-looking man standing there. "Larry, I barely recognized you," I said. "I know people say my face has changed lately," Larry said. He looked like he had been through a lot. Olivia and Kelly were convicted and fined, and I had claimed alimony from Larry. They must be struggling financially now. They still had to pay off the mortgage on the defective house, so things were tough. "How are Olivia and Kelly?" I asked. "They're alive, just barely hanging on. They're both working now because they have to, or we wouldn't survive. They always say they want to go back to the old life, relying on my and your income. They haven't changed a bit. They're like parasites," Larry said. Cutting ties with them was definitely the right decision. I thought he might argue, but he didn't. Larry sighed deeply and apologized to me. "I'm really sorry for everything. I deeply regret it. I was a fool. You were right. I should have always been on your side. I must have been out of my mind." "Your whole family has been out of their minds from the start," I replied coldly. "Please, let's live together again. I'll cut ties with them for real this time." "You're the only one for me," he pleaded. "Oh really? Too bad. I'm seeing someone else now." "Even if I wasn't, I'd never take you back," I said firmly. When I said that, Larry collapsed to his knees, but his pitiful act didn't work on me anymore. If I were less well-mannered, I would have spat on him right then. I left him there and went home. He never contacted me again. The real estate agent who helped me told me that Olivia, Larry, and Kelly's lives had fallen apart. They blamed each other for their poverty, which worsened their relationships. Neighbors heard shouting and glass breaking from their house almost every night. They berated and tormented each other but couldn't break free. It was nothing short of hell. They were quite isolated in the community, with no one wanting to interact with them. Eventually, they will likely sell their unsellable house for next to nothing and end up homeless with just their debts. I can clearly imagine the three of them huddled together, cursing each other under the cold sky. One day, I'd like to see their miserable state when they've hit rock bottom. Meanwhile, I'm living a happy life that feels almost unreal. It's all thanks to my new partner, the one I mentioned to Larry. He's a successful salesperson at a big trading company, a mature man with a gentle nature who respects others. He's also divorced, like me. We're planning a small wedding soon. My first marriage was a really bitter experience. Even now, I sometimes tear up when I remember the hardships. But even during those times, I feel warmth and comfort when I lean on him. This is where I belong. I took a long detour, but I finally arrived. That's how I feel. Because of the struggles I've been through, I can now be kinder to others. I want to use my experiences to live a positive and bright life. That's how I feel these days.